The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Hyperspace routes are calculated with precision. Warp fields bend the fabric of space-time in predictable patterns. But what happens when two incompatible realities collide? When a military force built on the foundations of one universe finds itself adrift in another, where the very stars obey different masters. The answer would reshape the Alpha Quadrant forever. If you want to see more military forces or characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a faction or character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. Commander William Riker stood on the bridge of the USS Enterprise D, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen with an expression that vacillated between professional concern and genuine disbelief. The sensor readings had been impossible at first. Artifacts, Lieutenant Commander Data had suggested, perhaps interference from the nearby nebula. But the android's golden eyes now reflected certainty as his fingers danced across the ops console. "Captain, I am detecting multiple massive objects emerging from what appears to be a spatial anomaly," Data reported, his voice maintaining its characteristic precision even as the bridge lighting shifted to red alert status. Configuration unknown. Scale, unprecedented. Captain Jean-Luc Picard rose from his command chair, tugging his uniform tunic straight in the unconscious gesture his crew knew well. The gesture that meant he was preparing for something that would test every diplomatic skill he possessed. On screen. The view screen shimmered, and the bridge fell silent. They were triangular. Massive wedge-shaped vessels that dwarfed even the Enterprise's considerable bulk, their hulls a stark gray-white that seemed to drink in the starlight rather than reflect it. The lead ship stretched over a mile in length, its surface studded with weapon emplacements that tracked with predatory precision. Smaller craft, angular, aggressive fighters with solar panel wings, swarmed around the capital ships like insects around a hive. "My God," breathed Lieutenant Worf from Tactical, his Klingon instincts recognizing a war fleet when he saw one. "Captain, those vessels are armed. Heavily armed. I am reading what appear to be directed energy weapons, far exceeding our phaser array capacity. Hull composition unknown, but sensor scans indicate armor plating of extraordinary density." Counselor Deanna Troy's empathic senses reached out across the void, and she gasped softly. "Captain, I'm sensing thousands of minds. Disciplined. Focused." And, she paused, her betazoid abilities struggling with something alien. Fear. Confusion. But beneath it all, absolute loyalty to something. Or someone. Picard's eyes narrowed. "Number of vessels, Mr. Worf?" 3 capital ships, sir. And approximately 72 of the smaller fighter craft. "Captain, the lead vessel is over 1,600 meters in length. Its weapons are now tracking our position." "Hail them, Mr. Worf." "All frequencies." The Klingon security chief's fingers moved across his console, sending out the universal greeting protocols that had served the Federation for decades. First contact situations were delicate, requiring patience, cultural sensitivity, and above all, the presumption of peaceful intent. The response was immediate, but it was not what anyone on the bridge expected. A voice, deep and mechanical, filtered through a respirator that turned breath itself into something ominous, filled the bridge. It spoke in a language the universal translator struggled with for half a second before finding purchase, rendering the words into Federation standard with an undercurrent of the original's menacing timbre. "Unidentified vessel. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be met with immediate destruction. Comply, or be destroyed. You have 30 seconds. Picard exchanged a glance with Riker. First contact protocols did not typically include surrender demands. "This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the United Federation of Planets Starship Enterprise. We mean you no harm. We detected your vessels emerging from what appeared to be a spatial anomaly and wished to offer assistance if." 20 seconds. Worf's fingers hovered over his tactical controls, awaiting orders. The Klingon's jaw was set, his warrior's pride bristling at the threat. Around the bridge, junior officers shifted nervously. This was not how encounters with unknown species were supposed to proceed. Data's console chirped urgently. "Captain, I am detecting a significant energy buildup in the lead vessel's forward weapons arrays. Based on the energy signatures, I estimate destructive capacity equal to or exceeding our own photon torpedoes. Multiple batteries are now targeting our position." Picard's mind raced through options. The Prime Directive demanded non-interference, but it said nothing about defending oneself against unprovoked aggression. Yet firing on these ships without understanding who they were or why they were here could ignite a war the Federation was unprepared to fight. "Open a channel, Mr. Worf." Again. The view screen shifted, and the bridge crew of the Enterprise found themselves face to face with something from a nightmare. The figure stood over 2 meters tall, encased entirely in black armor that seemed to absorb light. A helmet with a triangular grille covered the face entirely, revealing nothing human, if human was even what lay beneath. A flowing black cape draped from broad shoulders. But it was the breathing that truly unsettled them. A rhythmic, mechanical wheeze that spoke of lungs kept alive by technology, of a body sustained past the point where nature would have claimed it. Behind this dark figure, white-armored soldiers stood in perfect formation, their faceless helmets tracking the view screen with disciplined precision. Each held a weapon, sleek, efficient rifles that radiated purpose. "I am Lord Vader of the Galactic Empire," the figure said, the respirator turning each word into a pronouncement of doom. "Commander of the 501st Legion and executor of the Emperor's will. Your Federation is unknown to us. You will provide navigational data immediately. Where is the nearest Imperial outpost? What sector is this?" Troy's face had gone pale. "Captain, I sense darkness. Pain. Rage held under absolute control. And power. Tremendous power, but not like anything I've encountered. It's as if..." She cut herself off, but Picard understood. Whatever this Vader was, he was unlike any being the Federation had catalogued. "Lord Vader," Picard began carefully, "I'm afraid I cannot answer your questions because I do not understand them. There is no Galactic Empire in our records. No 501st Legion. You have emerged from what we detected as a spatial anomaly, a rift between dimensions or realities, perhaps. If you will allow us to lower our shields and extend our diplomatic. You will answer my questions, Captain." Vader's hand rose slowly, almost lazily. On the view screen, they could see his fingers curl into a gesture, and Picard gasped, his hand flying to his throat. Invisible pressure, impossible and terrifying, closed around his windpipe. He couldn't breathe. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as Riker leapt forward and Data's fingers flew across his console searching for the source of the attack. "Captain!" Riker shouted. As quickly as it began, the pressure released. Picard staggered, catching himself against his command chair, breathing heavily. Worf's hand was already on his phaser, but Picard raised a hand, forestalling the security chief. On the view screen, Vader lowered his hand. "I find your lack of answers disturbing, Captain Picard. But I sense you speak truth. You do not know of the Empire." The Dark Lord turned slightly, addressing someone off-screen. "Commander, what is our hyperspace status?" A crisp, military voice responded. "My lord, hyperdrive is non-functional. Engineering reports the motivator is intact, but the navigation computer cannot establish a hyperspace route. It's as if the hyperspace lanes don't exist, my lord." A long, terrible silence followed, punctuated only by Vader's mechanical breathing. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a man, if man he was, who had just realized he was cut off from everything he knew. "Then we are stranded." Vader's helmeted gaze fixed on Picard once more, and the captain felt the weight of that eyeless stare. "Captain Picard. It appears circumstances have changed. You will provide us with information about this Federation. And you will tell us everything you know about the space surrounding us. It was not a request. Picard straightened, his throat still aching, but his voice firm. Lord Vader, the United Federation of Planets is an alliance of worlds committed to peaceful exploration and mutual cooperation. We do not respond well to threats or violence. If you and your fleet require assistance, we are prepared to offer it. But first, you must power down your weapons and agree to abide by our protocols for first contact. The breathing continued, mechanical and relentless. Protocols, Vader said slowly, as if tasting the word and finding it distasteful. The Empire does not abide by the protocols of others, Captain. The Empire creates order from chaos. But, another pause, and Picard could almost hear the calculation behind that mask. We are far from Imperial space. Without hyperspace, my fleet is vulnerable. Very well, Captain Picard. We will discuss this Federation of yours. But know this. The 501st Legion serves the Emperor, and the Emperor's will is absolute. Where we go, order follows. The view screen cut to black, returning to the image of the 3-star destroyers hanging in space like monuments to martial power. Riker turned to Picard, concern etched on his face. Captain, are you all right? Picard nodded slowly, his mind already racing ahead to the implications. Number 1, I want full sensor analysis of those ships. Data, compile everything we know about spatial anomalies that could transport vessels across dimensional boundaries. Worf, discreetly put the fleet on alert, quietly, I don't want to provoke them. And get me Admiral Nechayev. She needs to know what's just arrived in Federation space. As the bridge crew moved to execute his orders, Picard stood before the view screen, studying the alien warships. Somewhere aboard one of those vessels was a being who could reach across the void and choke him with a gesture. A military force that spoke of emperors and legions, of order imposed by force. They were stranded, desperate, and heavily armed. And they had just met the Federation. Counselor, Picard said quietly, you said you sensed tremendous power from Lord Vader. Not technological. Something else. Troy nodded, her dark eyes troubled. Yes, Captain. It was unlike anything in our records. As if he could reach out and touch the fabric of reality itself. Bend it to his will. Picard's expression hardened with resolve. Then we'll need to proceed very carefully indeed. Because we may have just encountered something the Federation has never faced before, a force that doesn't recognize the principles we've built our entire civilization upon. The red alert klaxons continued their rhythmic warning, and in the view screen, the Star Destroyers began to adjust their formation, moving into a defensive posture that spoke of military precision honed across countless battles. The 501st Legion had arrived in the Star Trek universe. And nothing would ever be the same. The conference room of the USS Enterprise D had hosted countless diplomatic encounters. Vulcans with their impeccable logic. Klingon with their fierce honor. Even the enigmatic Temerians with their metaphorical language. But as Captain Picard stood at the head of the polished table, waiting for his guest to materialize, he knew this meeting would be unlike any other. Transporter room reports they're ready, Captain, Lieutenant Worf announced, his voice tight with barely concealed tension. The Klingon security chief stood with 3 armed security officers positioned strategically around the room, phaser rifles held at ready but not raised. A compromise between hospitality and prudence. Energize, Picard ordered. The familiar shimmer of the transporter beam filled the far end of the conference room, and the air itself seemed to grow heavier as the molecular patterns resolved into solidity. Lord Vader materialized first, his towering frame making the spacious conference room feel suddenly confined. The black armor gleamed dully under the Enterprise's lighting, and that respirator continued its rhythmic, unsettling cadence. Behind him, 6 stormtroopers in pristine white armor took positions along the wall, their E-11 blaster rifles held in parade rest but easily accessible. Their helmets tracked the room with mechanical precision, faceless and inscrutable. Picard stepped forward, extending his hand in the traditional human gesture of greeting. "Lord Vader, welcome aboard the Enterprise." I know who you are, Captain Picard." Vader's mechanical voice cut through the pleasantries. The Dark Lord ignored the offered hand, his gaze, if gaze it could be called behind that mask, sweeping the room, cataloging exits, weapons, threats. A warrior's assessment, quick and thorough. "Your ship's internal layout is inefficient. Too many civilian areas. Your weapons are positioned for external threats, not internal security. Your crew is undisciplined. I passed 3 officers in your corridors who failed to acknowledge a superior officer's presence." Riker bristled beside Picard, but the captain raised a calming hand. "The Enterprise is a vessel of exploration, Lord Vader, not solely a warship. We carry families, scientists, educators. Our mission is to seek out new life and new civilizations, to expand the boundaries of knowledge. Knowledge without power is meaningless." Vader moved to the viewport, his cape flowing behind him with theatrical menace. Outside, his 3-star destroyers hung in formation, their gray hulls a stark contrast to the Enterprise's elegant lines. "Your Federation builds ships that can barely defend themselves and calls it enlightenment. The Empire builds ships that enforce order across a galaxy, and we call it survival." Counselor Troy spoke carefully, her empathic senses still reeling from the darkness emanating from Vader. "Lord Vader, we understand you and your fleet are far from home. Perhaps if you could tell us more about your empire, we might better understand how to help you." The helmeted head turned slowly toward her, and Troy felt the weight of his attention like a physical force. "You are perceptive, Counselor. I sense your abilities, crude, undisciplined, but present. You touch minds as I touch the Force." He paused, and the breathing filled the silence. "Very well. You wish to understand the Empire. Then understand this: there was a republic once. 1,000 generations of Jedi Knights protecting a democratic union of star systems. But democracy breeds corruption. Bureaucracy. Endless debate while evil flourishes unchecked. The Republic fell because it was weak. The Empire rose because strength, not idealism, governs the galaxy." Data, seated at the conference table with a PADD displaying sensor readings, tilted his head in that characteristic gesture of curiosity. "Lord Vader, you refer to the Force. Our sensors detected an anomalous energy signature when you interacted with Captain Picard on our initial contact. This Force, is it a form of directed psionic ability? Telekinesis combined with telepathy? The Force is beyond your understanding, android." Vader's tone held neither contempt nor respect, merely statement of fact. "It is the energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. Those sensitive to it can manipulate reality itself. Move objects without touching them. Perceive thoughts and feelings. See the future. Even influence the weak-minded." Worf's hand moved incrementally closer to his phaser. "This Force, it is a weapon. Everything is a weapon, Klingon." Vader turned fully to face Worf, and for a moment, the 2 warriors measured each other across the conference room. "But the Force is also a tool for imposing order. The Jedi used it to maintain peace in the Republic. The Sith use it to ensure the Empire's dominance. I serve the Emperor, and through his will, the galaxy knows order." Picard leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "Lord Vader, I must be frank. The philosophy you describe, imposing order through force, ruling through fear and military might, is antithetical to everything the Federation stands for. We believe in the right of all sentient beings to self-determination. We believe cooperation and mutual respect create lasting peace, not subjugation." The breathing continued, steady and implacable. "Then your Federation is doomed to fail, Captain. Peace without strength is merely an invitation for chaos. Your prime directive, yes, my officers have been monitoring your communications, analyzing your databases, forbids you from interfering with less developed civilizations. Noble, perhaps. But what happens when those civilizations destroy themselves? When they cry out for help, and your principles prevent you from acting? The Empire does not hesitate. The Empire brings order, even to those who resist it. Even to those who don't want it, Riker interjected, his voice hard. That's not order, Lord Vader. That's tyranny. For a long moment, Vader simply breathed, that mechanical rhythm filling the conference room like a ticking clock counting down to something inevitable. Commander Riker, Vader finally said, I have served the Empire for over 20 years. I have seen worlds torn apart by civil war, populations enslaved by criminal cartels, entire systems collapse into anarchy. And I have seen the Empire bring stability to all of it. Your Federation speaks of ideals. The Empire delivers results. He turned back to the viewport. But this is irrelevant. We are here now, in your space, without the means to return home. My priority is the survival and operational integrity of the 501st Legion. We require supplies, fuel, and intelligence about this region of space. Data's fingers moved across his PADD. Lord Vader, our analysis of your vessel's power system suggests they operate on a fuel source we cannot immediately identify. The energy signature is consistent with matter-antimatter reactions, but the containment methodology is unlike our own. Additionally, your hyperdrive technology appears to rely on principles incompatible with local subspace mechanics. We may be able to adapt. You will not have access to Imperial technology, Vader interrupted. Your Federation's tendency to share knowledge freely is a security risk we will not tolerate. My engineers will adapt our systems without your assistance. Picard's jaw tightened. Lord Vader, if you refuse our help, you condemn your people to eventual resource depletion. Your ships may be formidable, but they cannot sustain themselves indefinitely without resupply. We are offering you a path forward. Don't let pride. The lights flickered. Every officer in the room tensed as Vader's fist clenched slowly, and an invisible pressure built in the air itself, making it hard to breathe. The stormtroopers behind him remained motionless, but their rifles shifted fractionally, ready. Do not presume to lecture me about pride, Captain. Vader's voice dropped to something even more dangerous than before. I have sacrificed more than you can comprehend in service to order. I have become what I am because the galaxy demanded it. The pressure released as suddenly as it had appeared. But you are correct. The 501st requires resources. Very well. We will accept limited cooperation. Fuel, if your systems are compatible. Navigational data about this sector. And information about any military threats we should anticipate. In exchange? Picard asked carefully. In exchange, we will not seize them by force. Consider it diplomacy, Captain. Imperial style. Troy's voice was soft but urgent. Captain, I'm sensing conflict within him. Pain. Regret buried under layers of control. He believes what he's saying, but there's something else. Something he's suppressing. Vader's helmet snapped toward her with predatory speed. Guard your thoughts more carefully, Counselor, or I will guard them for you. The Force reveals many things, including the minds of those who probe unwisely. Before Troy could respond, the comm system chirped. Bridge to Captain Picard. Picard tapped his comm badge. Go ahead. Captain, we're being hailed by a Klingon bird of prey. Captain Kvok of the IKS PAG. He's demanding to speak with you immediately. He says they've detected the Imperial vessels and want to know if the Federation requires assistance dealing with an invasion force. Worf's expression shifted to something almost resembling approval. The Klingon have always respected strength, Captain. They would see Lord Vader's fleet as a challenge worthy of honor. Vader turned from the viewport. Klingon. I encountered your tactical database files during our scans. Warriors who value honor and direct combat. Crude, but potentially useful. He moved toward Picard with deliberate steps. Tell your Klingon allies that the 501st Legion does not fear challenges. If they wish to test our strength, we will oblige them. If they wish to prove themselves worthy of respect, let them come. Absolutely not, Picard said firmly. I will not facilitate a battle between your forces and the Klingon Empire. The Klingon are our allies, and I will not. Then you will lose their respect, Captain. Warriors understand strength. Your Federation's diplomacy may work with scientists and philosophers, but warriors require proof. Vader gestured to the viewport where his star destroyers loomed. Allow me to demonstrate to these Klingon that the 501st is not to be trifled with. A show of force now prevents unnecessary conflict later. Riker stepped forward. Or it starts a war we're not prepared to fight. You are never prepared for war, Commander. That is why the Federation will always be vulnerable. Vader's respirator breathing filled another pause. But perhaps there is a middle path. I will meet with this Captain Kvok. Warrior to warrior. If he is honorable, as your database suggests Klingon value honor, then we will reach an understanding. If not, the implication hung in the air like the blade of a guillotine. Picard considered the options, each worse than the last. Refuse, and risk Vader taking action independently. 3 star destroyers against a single bird of prey would be a massacre. Accept, and potentially legitimize Vader's might makes right philosophy. But Kvok was a reasonable captain, as Klingon went. Perhaps a controlled meeting could prevent escalation. Very well, Picard said slowly. But the meeting will take place here, on the Enterprise, under my supervision. And Lord Vader, if you harm Captain Kvok or his crew, you will discover that the Federation can be pushed only so far. Vader's helmet tilted slightly, something that might have been amusement in the gesture. A threat, Captain Picard? Perhaps your Federation has more steel than I credited. Very well. We will meet these Klingon. And we shall see if they are the warriors their reputation suggests, or merely more pretenders hiding behind bravado. As Vader and his stormtroopers departed for the transporter room, Picard exchanged glances with his senior staff. Data was already calculating probability matrices. Worf looked ready for combat. Troy's face reflected deep concern. Riker simply shook his head. Captain, Riker said quietly, we're playing with fire here. If Vader and Kvok decide to turn this into a contest of strength, then we'll need to be very clever indeed, number 1. Picard moved to the viewport, watching the Imperial ships adjust their formation. Because we've just invited 2 warrior cultures to sit at the same table. And I have a feeling neither one is interested in backing down. The transporter room hummed with tension as Captain Kvok materialized alongside his first officer and 2 heavily armed Klingon warriors. The Klingon captain was a wall of muscle and scarred flesh, his ridged forehead bearing the marks of a dozen battles. He wore his disruptor pistol openly on his hip, and his eyes swept the room with the predatory assessment of a career soldier. Captain Picard, Kvok rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. Your message said an unknown military force has entered Federation space. The High Council demands to know if this is a threat to the Empire. Captain Kvok, the situation is complex. Picard gestured toward the corridor. If you'll accompany me to the conference room, I'll introduce you to. I do not need introductions, Picard. I need to know if these ships plan to invade Klingon territory. If they do, the Pag and her sister ships will destroy them before they cross the border. Worf stepped forward, his own Klingon pride evident. Captain Kvok, the Imperial fleet possesses weaponry beyond our current tactical assessment. Engaging them without proper reconnaissance would be glorious. Kvok's laugh was harsh and without humor. Worf, son of Moke, you have spent too long among humans. When a warrior faces an unknown enemy, he does not cower behind sensors and analysis. He meets them blade to blade and discovers their worth in combat. The conference room doors opened, and Kvok froze mid-step. Lord Vader stood at the far end of the room, his black armor drinking in the light, his cape motionless despite the environmental system's gentle air circulation. The 6 stormtroopers flanking him stood in perfect formation, their white armor pristine and their weapons held with professional precision. But it was Vader himself who commanded attention, the sheer presence of him, the mechanical breathing that seemed to count down to violence, the sense that this being had walked through fire and emerged as something no longer entirely alive. Kvok's hand moved to his disruptor, a warrior's reflex. Captain Kvok, this is Lord Vader of the Galactic Empire, Picard began carefully. Commander of the 501st Legion An. I can introduce myself, Captain Picard. Vader's mechanical voice cut through the diplomatic niceties. He took 3 measured steps forward, and Kvok's warriors raised their disruptor rifles in response. The stormtroopers' E-11 blasters snapped to ready positions with military precision. Hold! Picard commanded, his voice sharp enough to freeze both sides. This is a diplomatic meeting, not a battlefield. Everyone will lower their weapons. Now. For a moment, the room balanced on the edge of violence. Then Vader raised a hand, and his stormtroopers lowered their rifles smoothly, returning to parade rest as if choreographed. Kvok watched this display of discipline, then grunted approval and gestured for his own warriors to stand down. So, Kvok said, his eyes never leaving Vader. You are the one who commands those vessels. Star Destroyers, my tactical officer calls them. Impressive ships. But ships do not make warriors. Tell me, Lord Vader, do you hide behind that mask because you fear to show your face? Or because there is nothing left to show? Riker tensed, expecting an explosion of force-powered rage. Worf's hand drifted toward his phaser. But Vader simply stood there, breathing, that mechanical rhythm never faltering. I wear this armor because it keeps me alive, Klingon. My body was broken in service to my Emperor. Burned. Shattered. Rebuilt with machinery and willpower. This mask is not a shield, it is a weapon. A reminder that I have transcended the weakness of flesh. Kvok circled slowly, studying Vader the way a predator studies unfamiliar prey. You speak of service. Of sacrifice. These are concepts a Klingon understands. But you speak also of an emperor, one being who commands your loyalty. Where is the honor in serving a master you have never challenged? In the Klingon Empire, leadership is earned through strength. The weak are cast down. The strong rise. The Sith have similar beliefs. Vader turned to track Kvok's movement, the 2 warriors orbiting each other like binary stars. The apprentice eventually surpasses the master. The strong replace the weak. But the Emperor is beyond such challenges. His power in the Force is absolute. I serve because his vision will bring order to chaos. Order. Kvok spat the word like a curse. The Federation preaches order through cooperation. You preach order through domination. Both are cowards' paths. True order comes from strength meeting strength, from warriors testing themselves against worthy opponents. That is how the Empire expands. Not through debate or subjugation, but through conquest that proves superiority. Picard intervened before the philosophical debate could evolve into a physical one. Gentlemen, perhaps we could discuss the practical matters at hand. Lord Vader's fleet requires resources and navigational data. The Federation is prepared to offer humanitarian assistance, but we need assurances that. Humanitarian assistance. Kvok's laugh was sharp. Picard, you cannot be serious. This is a military force, not refugees. They have warships, soldiers, weapons that your own tactical officer admits exceed Federation capabilities. And you want to give them supplies so they can grow stronger? He turned to Vader. At least you are honest about what you are, Lord Vader. The Federation wraps conquest in pretty words like exploration and cooperation, but you make no apologies for being a weapon. I am more than a weapon, Captain Kvok. I am the instrument of Imperial will. Where I go, resistance ends. Chaos becomes order. The weak are protected, and the strong are bound to purpose. Vader's fist clenched slowly. You speak of honor and combat as if they are the highest virtues. But honor without discipline is merely barbarism with better vocabulary. Kvok's eyes narrowed dangerously. You dare call Klingon barbarians? I dare state facts. Your empire expands through conquest, yes. But from what I have learned of your culture, you also value worthy opponents. You give defeated enemies the chance to die with honor. You maintain codes of behavior even in war. Vader's helmet tilted slightly. The Galactic Empire recognizes no such limitations. We do not offer honorable deaths. We offer submission or annihilation. Which approach do you believe creates more lasting order? Data, observing the exchange with fascination, interjected with his characteristic precision. Lord Vader, your philosophy suggests that fear is a more effective tool of governance than respect. However, historical analysis across multiple civilizations indicates that regimes built solely on fear invariably collapse when the source of that fear is removed or diminished. The Klingon approach, while violent, at least acknowledges the agency of the conquered. Your approach treats sentient beings as variables to be eliminated rather than potential allies to be earned. The android speaks wisdom, Kvok said, surprised. Perhaps there is hope for the Federation yet. Vader turned his attention to Data, and the android met that faceless gaze without flinching. You are artificial, yet you philosophize as if you possess genuine consciousness. Curious. In the Empire, droids serve their masters without question. You, however, seem to believe yourself equal to organic beings. I am equal, Lord Vader, in that I possess the same rights and responsibilities under Federation law. My positronic brain allows for independent thought, creativity, and moral reasoning. I am as much a sentient being as you are. Are you? Vader's hand rose, fingers extending, and Data felt something he had never experienced before, a pressure, not physical but metaphysical, probing at the edges of his consciousness. The Force reveals truth, android. And what I sense from you is interesting. Not life, precisely. But not mere machinery either. You exist in a space between, neither fully one nor the other. Like me. The pressure released, and Data tilted his head thoughtfully. Your Force appears to operate on principles that bridge quantum mechanics and consciousness studies. Fascinating. If you would be willing to allow me to run sensor scans while you demonstrate these abilities, I could perhaps help you understand how they function in this universe's physical laws. The Force is not a science experiment, Mr. Data. It is a fundamental truth of existence. Counselor Troy, who had been monitoring the emotional undercurrents of the conversation, spoke carefully. Lord Vader, Captain Kvok, beneath all this posturing about strength and order, I sense you both share something fundamental. You've both sacrificed for what you believe in. You both carry scars, physical and otherwise, from battles that defined you. Perhaps instead of debating philosophies, you could find common ground in mutual respect for what each of you has endured. Kvok snorted. The counselor thinks to make us friends with pretty words about shared trauma. I respect strength, not suffering. But Vader had gone still, and for a long moment, only his breathing filled the silence. You probe deeply, Counselor Troy. Too deeply. His voice was quiet, which somehow made it more dangerous. Yes, I have sacrificed. I have lost everything I was to become what I am. Do not mistake that for weakness. It is the source of my power. I don't mistake it for weakness, Troy said softly. I recognize it as pain you've transformed into purpose. But Lord Vader, purpose built on pain is a fragile foundation. What happens when that purpose is taken from you? When your Emperor is beyond reach, when your mission has no clear objective? Who are you then? The question hung in the air like a blade. Before Vader could respond, Worf's tactical console chirped urgently. Captain, sensors are detecting 3 more vessels entering the system. Configuration: Romulan warbuds. They're decloaking off our port bow. Every head in the room turned to the viewport, where 3 Deridex-class warbuds shimmered into visibility, their green hulls and predatory designs unmistakable. They moved into formation between the Enterprise and Vader's Star Destroyers, weapons powered but not locked. The Romulans, Kvok growled. They've been monitoring our communications. Of course they have. Picard's combadge chirped. Captain, we're receiving a hail from the lead Romulan vessel. Commander Torith requests to speak with you immediately. She says she has a proposal for Lord Vader. Vader moved to the viewport, studying the Romulan ships with the tactical assessment of a career military commander. Romulans. Secretive. Strategic. Willing to use deception and misdirection. Your database was quite thorough, Captain Picard. He turned back to the room. It seems word of the 501st's arrival has spread quickly. How many other powers will come to evaluate whether we are threat or opportunity? In this quadrant? Picard said grimly. Potentially dozens. The Romulans, the Klingon, the Federation, were only the beginning. There are the Cardassians, the Ferengi, the Breen. And beyond them, threats that make conventional military forces seem trivial. Such as? Vader asked. Data answered, his voice carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. The Borg Collective, Lord Vader. A cybernetic hive mind that assimilates entire civilizations, absorbing their technological and biological distinctiveness. They do not negotiate. They do not compromise. They simply adapt and consume. Your fleet's unique technology and your force abilities would be considered highly desirable by the Collective. For the first time since arriving, Vader seemed to pause, considering. A hive mind. Individuals subsumed into collective consciousness. Fascinating. And terrifying. He looked at Kvok. It seems, Captain, that this universe offers challenges worthy of even the 501st Legion. Kvok's fierce grin was all teeth. Then perhaps you are not completely without honor after all, Lord Vader. Any warrior who recognizes a worthy challenge deserves respect. He extended his hand in the human gesture Picard had offered earlier, the gesture Vader had ignored. The Klingon Empire does not ally easily with outsiders. But we recognize strength when we see it. If you prove yourself worthy in battle, we may yet find common cause. Vader looked at the extended hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and clasped it. The handshake lasted exactly 3 seconds, long enough to acknowledge mutual respect, short enough to avoid implying submission. The 501st does not need allies, Captain Kvok. But we recognize useful strategic relationships. If the Klingon Empire proves itself in the battles to come, we will remember. Picard watched this exchange with deep concern. 2 warrior cultures, finding common ground in violence and strength. This was precisely what he had hoped to avoid. But before he could intervene, his combadge chirped again. Captain, the Romulans are insisting on speaking with you. Commander Torith says if you don't respond in the next 60 seconds, she will assume hostile intent and act accordingly. Vader returned to the viewport, his cape settling around him like folded wings. The Romulans wish to make their offer. Very well. Let them speak, Captain Picard. I am curious to hear what this Empire of Secrets believes they can offer the 501st Legion. And as Picard moved to respond to the Romulan hail, he couldn't shake the feeling that events were spiraling beyond diplomatic control. Three major powers, Federation, Klingon, and Romulan, all circling an unknown force like sharks drawn to blood in the water. The question was no longer whether conflict was inevitable. The question was who would strike first. Commander Toritha's face filled the viewscreen, her expression a mask of Romulan calculation. She was older than most commanders, her dark hair streaked with gray, her eyes carrying the weight of decades spent navigating the treacherous politics of the Romulan Star Empire. Behind her, the bridge of her warbird was dimly lit in shades of green and amber, consoles manned by officers who moved with quiet efficiency. "Captain Picard," she began, her voice smooth as silk over dura steel. "How convenient that we find you entertaining both Klingon and Imperial guests. The neutral zone has become quite crowded." "Commander Torith," Picard replied with careful diplomacy. "The vessels you see are the result of a spatial anomaly, not an invasion force. They are stranded, and we are attempting to determine." "Spare me the Federation platitudes, Picard." Toritha's eyes shifted past him, fixing on the black-armored figure standing by the viewport. "I wish to speak with Lord Vader. The one who commands those impressive star destroyers. Unless, of course, he hides behind the Federation's skirts while evaluating his options." Kvok barked a laugh. "The Romulan has claws, at least. Let us see if she has teeth to match." Vader moved forward with deliberate steps until he dominated the viewscreen's perspective, his towering frame and imposing armor making even Picard seem diminished by proximity. The breathing, that eternal mechanical rhythm, filled the moment before he spoke. "I am Vader. State your purpose, Commander, or cease wasting my time." Toritha's lips curved into something that might have been a smile, might have been a sneer. "Direct. I appreciate that. Lord Vader, allow me to be equally direct. The Romulan Star Empire has been monitoring your arrival and the diplomatic dance Captain Picard has been orchestrating. We see 3 star destroyers, heavily armed, technologically sophisticated, and commanded by a leader who clearly values strength over sentiment. We also see a leader who is stranded, cut off from his empire, surrounded by powers he does not fully understand." She paused, letting the assessment sink in. "The Empire recognizes opportunity when it presents itself. We would like to offer you an alternative to Federation charity and Klingon posturing. An alliance," Vader stated, not a question. "A mutually beneficial arrangement. The Romulan Star Empire controls substantial territory, resources, and industrial capacity. We have cloaking technology that makes our vessels invisible to sensors, a tactical advantage your star destroyers currently lack. We have shipyards that could study your technology and help you adapt it to this universe's physical laws. We have intelligence networks that span the quadrant." Torith leaned forward slightly. "In exchange, we would request access to your military expertise, your weaponry, and perhaps, information about this force you wield." Troy's empathic senses flared with warning. "Captain, I'm sensing calculation, ambition, but also fear. The Romulans see Lord Vader as a potential asset, but they're also terrified of what he represents. They want to control him before anyone else does." Toritha's eyes flickered to Troy with irritation. Betazoid interference. How typical of the Federation to employ telepaths and then preach about privacy and individual rights. Vader's helmet turned fractionally toward Troy, then back to the screen. "The counselor merely states what I already sense through the Force, Commander Torith. Your offer comes wrapped in honeyed words, but beneath them lies the stench of manipulation. You do not seek alliance, you seek to study us, to dissect our technology, to learn our weaknesses and exploit them when convenient. You speak as if the Federation offers anything different," Torith countered smoothly. Picard smiles and extends his hand in friendship while his android catalogs your every word, while his tactical officer analyzes your ships for vulnerabilities, while his counselor probes your emotional state. At least the Romulan Empire is honest about our intentions. We are a military power that respects other military powers. We do not dress conquest in the garments of exploration. Kvok slammed his fist on the conference table. Enough of this verbal sparring. Romulans are cowards who hide behind cloaking devices and strike from shadows. Lord Vader, if you ally with these PTQ, you reveal yourself as less than I credited. And the Klingon are brutes who mistake volume for wisdom, Torith shot back. Kvok, your empire's idea of diplomacy is to challenge everyone to ritual combat and wonder why civilized species avoid you. Better an honest blade than a hidden dagger, Romulan. Picard raised his voice over the escalating argument. That is enough. This is not a forum for you to settle old grievances. Lord Vader is perfectly capable of evaluating his options without your posturing. Vader had remained silent throughout the exchange, that mechanical breathing the only sound from his position. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. You are all correct, and you are all wrong. He turned from the view screen to address the entire room. Captain Picard, your Federation offers assistance wrapped in the expectation that we will adopt your values, submit to your prime directive, become another species catalogued and civilized by your enlightened philosophy. Captain Kvok, the Klingon Empire sees us as potential warriors to test yourself against or recruit for your endless honor-driven conflicts. Commander Torith, the Romulan Star Empire sees us as weapons to be acquired, studied, and eventually controlled or eliminated as threats. He moved to the center of the room, commanding the space as if it were a throne room. None of you understand what the 501st Legion represents. We are not refugees seeking sanctuary. We are not mercenaries seeking employment. We are not specimens to be studied. We are an Imperial military force, the finest soldiers in the galaxy, forged in countless campaigns across thousands of worlds. We serve the Emperor's vision of absolute order. Data tilted his head. But Lord Vader, your Emperor is not here. You are cut off from the chain of command that defines your purpose. By your own philosophy, you require orders to give your existence meaning. Without them, what is the 501st? The question struck deeper than any weapon. Vader's fist clenched, and the lights flickered as invisible pressure built in the room. A datapad on the conference table crumpled as if gripped by an invisible hand. The stormtroopers remained perfectly still, but their weapons shifted almost imperceptibly, responding to their lord's agitation. We are what we have always been, Vader said, his voice dangerously quiet. Instruments of order. The Emperor's absence does not diminish our purpose, it focuses it. We will establish order in this region of space. We will create a zone of Imperial control. And we will find a way to return to our galaxy, or we will build a new empire here. Over our dead bodies, Kvok growled, his hand moving to his disruptor. That can be arranged, Klingon. Picard stepped between them physically, an act of either courage or foolishness. Lord Vader, you cannot simply declare a sector of space under Imperial control. There are established governments here, treaties, territorial boundaries that have been negotiated over decades. If you attempt to conquer Federation worlds, you will force us to defend them. With what, Captain? Your single starship. Your fleet is scattered across hundreds of systems, maintaining your enlightened peace. By the time you assemble a response force, the 501st will have secured strategic positions, established supply lines, and fortified our position. Vader's helmet tilted slightly. Unless you are willing to fire on us right now. Are you, Captain Picard? Will you destroy 3 ships full of soldiers who have committed no crime in this universe except arriving here? Will you violate your own principles to prevent what you fear we might do? The question hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Riker moved closer to Picard, his voice low. Captain, he's right. If we let them leave this system, we have no way of tracking them effectively. The moment they engage warp drive, they could disappear into unexplored space and begin building their empire before we could mount an effective response. And if we fire on them now, Picard replied equally quietly, we become the aggressors. We prove his point about the Federation's hypocrisy. We cannot win this through force, will. On the view screen, Commander Torith had been listening with calculating interest. Lord Vader, the Romulan Empire's offer stands. We can provide you with territory, uninhabited systems beyond Federation borders where you could establish your base of operations without immediate conflict. We can offer you resources, intelligence, and time to adapt to this universe. All we ask in return is access to your knowledge and a non-aggression pact with Romulan space. You offer us a cage dressed as sanctuary, Vader observed. We would be dependent on Romulan supply lines, vulnerable to Romulan manipulation, isolated from any other potential allies. We would trade one emperor for another, merely a different master wearing a different face. Then what do you want? Toritha's frustration finally showed through her Romulan composure. You reject Federation assistance, dismiss Klingon respect, and see through Romulan strategy. You claim to need resources but refuse all offers of help. What does Lord Vader actually want? The question echoed in the silence, and Vader turned slowly to face the viewport where his 3-star destroyers hung against the stars like monuments to a fallen empire. I want what I have always wanted, he said, his voice carrying a weight of emotion that the mechanical respirator could not entirely mask. I want order. I want purpose. I want, he paused, and for just a moment, something almost human flickered beneath the armor. I want to matter. The Emperor gave me purpose when I had nothing left but anger and pain. The 501st gave me soldiers who trusted my leadership absolutely. The Empire gave me a galaxy to defend. And now all of that is gone, and you ask me what I want. Counselor Troy's voice was soft, almost gentle. You want to go home. The breathing filled the silence, mechanical and eternal. Home. Vader tested the word as if it were foreign. I have not had a home in over 20 years, Counselor. What I had was duty. And duty remains, even here. He turned back to face them all, his resolve hardening into something visible even through the mask. The 501st Legion will not submit to any of your governments. We will not become clients of the Romulans, pets of the Federation, or challenges for the Klingon. We will take what we need to survive, by negotiation if possible, by force if necessary. And we will forge our own path in this universe. That is a declaration of war, Kvok said, but there was something like respect in his tone. Against all of us. It is a declaration of independence, Vader corrected. We are not your enemies unless you make us so. We are not your allies unless you prove yourselves worthy. We are the 501st Legion. We answer to no one but ourselves now. Worf's tactical console erupted in urgent alerts. Captain, I'm detecting a massive energy surge from the lead star destroyer. They're charging weapons. Multiple batteries targeting. Captain, they're targeting a nearby asteroid field. What are they? The view screen shifted to show the lead star destroyer, Vader's flagship, rotating slowly to bring its port weapons arrays to bear on a cluster of asteroids drifting at the edge of the system. Green turbolaser fire lanced out in brilliant, devastating salvos, each bolt carrying enough energy to vaporize a city block. The asteroids didn't crack or fragment, they simply ceased to exist, reduced to superheated gas and debris in less than 3 seconds. The display of raw firepower was unmistakable. A message, clear and brutal, this is what we can do. Imagine it directed at your worlds. Kvok's eyes gleamed with warrior's appreciation. Impressive. Crude, perhaps, but effective. Lord Vader, Picard said, his voice tight with controlled anger, that was an unnecessary provocation. That was a demonstration, Captain Picard. So that everyone present understands the stakes. Vader's hand rose, gesturing to the view screen where the dissipating asteroid debris still glowed. The 501st does not make idle threats. We do not posture. When we say we will defend ourselves, we have the capacity to do so. When we say we will take what we need, we have the firepower to back that claim. And when we say we will forge our own path, we mean it absolutely. Commander Toritha's image on the screen had taken on a new quality, calculation mixed with genuine concern. Lord Vader, you have made your point. The Romulan Empire withdraws its offer of alliance. We will observe your actions from a distance and respond accordingly. But know this, if you threaten Romulan territory or interests, we will not hesitate to eliminate you, regardless of the cost. Understood, Commander. The 501st operates under the same principle. We will not seek conflict with the Romulan Empire unless you give us cause. Toritha's image vanished as the Romulan warbuds engaged their cloaking devices, fading from sensors like ghosts returning to shadow. But everyone in the conference room knew they hadn't truly left, they were watching, waiting, gathering intelligence. Kvok stood, his warrior's posture radiating barely contained aggression. Lord Vader, the Klingon Empire does not fear your weapons. We have faced the Borg, the Dominion, and countless other threats. But we also recognize strength when we see it. You have proven you are not to be dismissed. For now, we will observe. But if you prove yourself worthy in battle, if you demonstrate true honor, the Empire may yet extend an offer of alliance. On our terms, not yours. I would expect nothing less from warriors, Captain Kvok. The Klingon captain nodded once, sharply, then gestured to his officers. They beamed out in a shimmer of transporter energy, leaving only the Enterprise crew and Vader's stormtroopers in the conference room. Picard faced Vader directly, all diplomatic pretense stripped away. Lord Vader, you've just made enemies of half the quadrant. The Romulans will share intelligence about your capabilities with their allies. The Klingon will test you at every opportunity. And the Federation, we cannot allow you to simply seize territory and resources from innocent civilizations. We will oppose you. Then we will be opposed, Captain. But we will survive. We always have. Vader moved toward the transporter position, his stormtroopers falling in around him with practiced precision. Captain Picard, I do not hate you or your Federation. In another life, perhaps I would have admired your ideals. But I have seen where idealism leads, to weakness, to vulnerability, to chaos. The 501st will establish order. If you wish to negotiate for peaceful coexistence, my flagship will monitor Federation frequencies. If you wish to attempt to stop us by force. He let the sentence hang, unfinished but clear. Lord Vader, Data said suddenly, before you leave, a question, if I may. You serve order because you believe chaos is the alternative. But order imposed by fear is inherently unstable. When the source of fear is removed, the order collapses. Have you considered that the Federation's approach, while slower and more difficult, might create more lasting stability precisely because it does not rely on force? Vader paused at the transporter pad, his helmet turning to regard the android. An interesting question, Mr. Data. But you assume I have a choice. I am what I am. A weapon forged in fire, rebuilt in pain, given purpose through power. I cannot become what your Federation wishes. I can only be what I have always been, Lord Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, Commander of the 501st Legion, Servant of Order. The breathing filled another pause. Perhaps that makes me a monster in your eyes. Perhaps it makes me a relic of a more brutal time. But it makes me effective. Energize, he commanded. The transporter beam took him and his stormtroopers, their molecular patterns scattering into quantum states before reforming aboard the lead star destroyer. Through the viewport, the Enterprise crew watched as the three Imperial vessels began to move, their massive engines glowing with power as they adjusted course and prepared to jump to warp. Where are they going, Mr. Data? Picard asked quietly. Data's fingers flew across his console, tracking the Imperial ship's trajectory. Captain, based on their current heading, they appear to be moving towards Sector 441. That region contains several uninhabited systems with significant deuterium and mineral resources. There are also 2 pre-warp civilizations in adjacent sectors. Of course there are. Picard sank into his command chair, suddenly feeling every year of his age. Number 1, contact Starfleet Command. Inform them we have a situation. Mr. Data, I want continuous tracking on those star destroyers. And Counselor. Troy met his eyes, her expression troubled. Captain. You sensed something in Vader. Something beneath all that darkness and control. What was it? Troy considered her words carefully. Pain, Captain. Unimaginable pain, buried so deep he's built an entire identity around it. But also, doubt. For just a moment, when he talked about home, I sensed genuine uncertainty. He believes what he's saying about order and purpose, but there's a part of him that wonders if it's enough. If it was ever enough. Then perhaps there's still hope for negotiation, Riker suggested. Picard shook his head slowly. Or perhaps that's what makes him most dangerous, number 1. A true believer can be reasoned with, their principles appealed to. But a man who doubts his own purpose and compensates by imposing it ever more ruthlessly. That's not a man who can be negotiated with. That's a man who will burn the galaxy before admitting he might be wrong. Through the viewport, the Star Destroyers engaged their warp drives, the 3 ships accelerating past light speed in a display of power that left rippling distortions in spacetime. They vanished from visual range in seconds, but their presence, the weight of their arrival, the implications of their existence, remained like a dark cloud over the bridge. Captain, Worf said grimly, recommend we go to Yellow Alert and notify nearby starbases. If Lord Vader decides to establish his empire by force, we'll need every ship we can muster. Agreed. Make it so. Picard stood, moving to the viewport where the Star Destroyers had disappeared. But Mr. Worf, I want you to understand something. If it comes to war with the 501st Legion, we cannot win through superior firepower. We saw what their weapons can do. We'll need to be smarter, more adaptable, and above all, we'll need to prove that our way, the Federation's way, is not weakness, but strength of a different kind. And if we can't prove that, Captain? Riker asked quietly. Picard's jaw tightened. Then Lord Vader will impose his order on this quadrant, and everything we've built will become just another territory in his new empire. The red alert klaxons continued their warning rhythm, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, 3 Star Destroyers carried their cargo of soldiers, weapons, and 1 Dark Lord toward an uncertain future. The 501st Legion had chosen their path. Now the Federation would have to choose theirs. 3 weeks later. Starbase 157, Federation Border Region. Admiral Alina Nechayev stood before the holographic tactical display, her arms crossed, her expression carved from ice. Around the briefing room table sat representatives from a dozen Federation worlds, Starfleet tactical officers, and 3 starship captains who had encountered the 501st Legion's expansion firsthand. The hologram showed a spreading red zone across previously neutral space, 7 star systems claimed by Imperial forces in 21 days. Explain to me, Nechayev said with dangerous calm, how 3 ships, only 3, managed to establish control over 7 systems before Starfleet could mount an effective response. Captain Picard stood at the head of the table, his uniform immaculate, his bearing dignified despite the implicit criticism in the Admiral's tone. Admiral, the 501st strategy has been methodical and ruthlessly efficient. They target uninhabited systems rich in resources first, establishing mining and refueling operations. They avoid direct confrontation with major powers while systematically securing strategic positions. And they move faster than our intelligence network can track. They're using our own principles against us, Commander Shelby added from her position at Tactical. The Prime Directive prevents us from militarizing systems with pre-warp civilizations. Lord Vader recognizes this and positions his forces in buffer zones where we legally cannot station permanent defenses. The hologram zoomed in on one system, highlighting a star destroyer in orbit around an ice-covered moon. Delta Sigma 4, Nechayev identified. Uninhabited, but located along a major trade route between Federation and Ferengi space. The Ferengi Alliance has already filed 17 complaints about Imperial taxation of their cargo vessels passing through the system. Taxation. Captain Rachel Garrett of the USS Enterprise C leaned forward. Vader is charging for safe passage. Not exactly, Data replied, his golden eyes reflecting the holographic display. The 501st intercepts vessels, scans their cargo, and confiscates approximately 10% of any raw materials, power cells, or technology they deem strategically valuable. In exchange, they provide a transponder code that grants safe passage through Imperial-controlled space for 30 days. It is, functionally, a protection racket. And entirely effective, Nechayev admitted grimly. The Ferengi pay because the alternative is having their ships disabled and their cargo seized entirely. Independent traders are spreading word that Imperial space is safer than some Federation border regions because Vader's forces eliminate pirates and smugglers without the bureaucratic delays of Federation law enforcement. Picard's jaw tightened. Admiral, we cannot allow this precedent to stand. If Lord Vader establishes himself as a legitimate power broker, if independent ships start preferring Imperial order to Federation law, we legitimize his entire philosophy. I'm aware of the ideological stakes, Captain. Nechayev's eyes swept the room. What I need are practical solutions. We have 147 Starfleet vessels in this sector. The 501st has 3 capital ships and approximately 70 support craft. Why haven't we simply surrounded them and demanded their surrender? Commander Shelby brought up tactical projections. Because our simulations suggest any direct assault would result in catastrophic casualties, Admiral. The Star Destroyer's shields exceed our standard phaser penetration capacity. Their turbolasers outrange our photon torpedoes. And Lord Vader himself represents a variable we cannot quantify. Intelligence reports from the USS Excalibur describe him disabling their weapons systems without touching a console, manipulating their own technology against them through what he calls the Force. Unconfirmed reports, Nechayev countered, but her tone carried doubt. Confirmed by 17 witnesses, Admiral, Data corrected politely. Additionally, we have sensor logs from the Enterprise's first encounter showing Captain Picard experiencing respiratory distress while Lord Vader made a gesture from his viewscreen. The mechanism is unclear, but the effect is documented. Nechayev absorbed this with the stoicism of a career officer who had seen too much to dismiss anything as impossible. Recommendations? Captain Garrett spoke up, her voice carrying the weight of experience fighting the Romulans. Cut off their supply lines. Every resource they mine has to be processed, every ship they build requires industrial capacity. They can't establish an empire on 3 ships alone. If we blockade their territory and prevent them from acquiring the infrastructure they need, we force them to either negotiate or starve. A siege, Picard said slowly. Tactically sound, but ethically problematic. We would be condemning thousands of clone troopers and stormtroopers to slow resource depletion. And if Lord Vader responds by raiding Federation worlds for supplies, then we defend those worlds, Garrett said firmly. We're already at war, Captain Picard, whether you want to admit it or not. Vader declared independence from all established governments. He's seizing territory. He's extracting tribute from civilian vessels. These are acts of aggression, no matter how carefully he phrases them. Before Picard could respond, the briefing room doors hissed open. A young ensign rushed in, his face flushed. Admiral Nechayev, urgent communication from Outpost 47. They report a defector from the 501st Legion requesting asylum. A clone trooper who commandeered a TIE fighter and crossed into Federation space. The room fell silent. A defector, Nechayev repeated. Where is he now? Medical Bay, Admiral. He crash-landed on Rigel 7 and suffered significant injuries. But he's conscious and insisting he has intelligence about Lord Vader's plans. Nechayev exchanged glances with Picard. Captain, you established initial contact with the 501st. You'll accompany me to this interview. The rest of you, continue analyzing tactical options. If this defector provides actionable intelligence, I want contingency plans ready within the hour. Medical Bay, Starbase 157. The clone trooper looked small without his armor. He lay in a biobed, dermal regenerators working on burns across his torso and arms, his face, identical to thousands of others bred from the same genetic template, etched with pain in something deeper. Fear. Not the fear of dying, but the fear that comes from questioning everything you were created to believe. He was designated CT 5555, but the medical staff had learned he went by fives, a name, not a number. A small act of rebellion that spoke volumes. Fives, Nechayev began, her voice surprisingly gentle, you risked your life to reach Federation space. Why? Fives' eyes, brown, like all clone troopers, but carrying individual weight of experience, fixed on her with desperate intensity. Because I finally saw what we've become, Admiral. What we've always been. Tools. Weapons. Not soldiers. Not men. Just, instruments for someone else's will. Picard stepped closer to the biobed. What changed, Fives? From what we understand, clone troopers are conditioned for absolute loyalty. The 501st served the Republic, then the Empire, without question. What made you question now? It wasn't sudden, Captain. It was, Fives struggled for words, his hand clenching the bedsheet. When we arrived here, when the hyperdrive failed and Lord Vader realized we were cut off from the Emperor, for the first time in my life, I saw him uncertain. Just for a moment. And in that moment, I wondered, if Lord Vader himself doubts, why shouldn't I? Tell us about the 501st's current situation, Nechayev prompted. Resources, morale, strategic objectives. Fives took a shaky breath. We're operating at 73% efficiency. The Star Destroyer's main reactors are stable, but we've had to cannibalize systems to keep the hyperdrive components functional even though they don't work here. Lord Vader has ordered mining operations in 6 systems, deuterium, dilithium, duranium, anything we can process. He's got engineering teams working around the clock trying to adapt Imperial technology to this universe's physics. Data, who had accompanied them, tilted his head with interest. Has Lord Vader made progress in that adaptation? Some. The TIE fighters now use a hybrid engine system, Imperial ion drives with modifications based on captured Federation data. They're faster, more efficient. And Lord Vader has been, experimenting with the Force. Trying to understand how it works in this universe's physical laws. He spends hours in meditation, reaching out, testing boundaries. Testing for what? Picard asked. Fives met his eyes. For a way home, Captain. Lord Vader is obsessed with returning to our galaxy. Everything else, the mining, the territory, the strategic positioning, it's all in service to that goal. He doesn't want to build an empire here. He wants to tear a hole between dimensions and go back. The implications hung in the air like a suspended blade. Is such a thing even possible? Nechayev demanded. Data's expression grew thoughtful. Theoretically, Admiral, if one could generate sufficient energy and precisely manipulate subspace geometry, a controlled dimensional rift might be achievable. However, the power requirements would be astronomical. On the order of a planet's entire output for several days. Or, he paused. Or the combined power of multiple starship reactors simultaneously overloading. He'd destroy entire systems trying, Picard said quietly. Dimensional rifts are inherently unstable. We've encountered them before. They tear spacetime apart, create cascading failures in local physics. If Vader attempts to force a passage home and fails, he could create a permanent wound in reality. Fives nodded weakly. That's why I ran, Captain. Because I heard him talking to Commander Pragi, the Star Destroyer's captain. He said if they can't find a way home through science, they'll find one through the Force. He said the dark side allows you to achieve the impossible through will alone. And I've seen what he can do when he's determined. The clone trooper's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I think he'd sacrifice this entire quadrant if it meant returning to the Emperor's service. Nechayev's face had gone hard as durasteel. Captain Picard, we need to act immediately. If Vader is planning some kind of dimensional breach experiment. The lights flickered. Then died completely, plunging the medical bay into darkness for 3 heartbeats before emergency lighting engaged, bathing everything in red. Report. Nechayev snapped, reaching for her comm badge. The response came from the Starbase Operations Center, the officer's voice tight with controlled panic. Admiral, we're detecting 3 objects decloaking off the Starbase ventral section. Configuration matches Imperial Star Destroyers. They're hailing us, Admiral. It's Lord Vader. He's demanding we return his property. Picard's blood ran cold. He tracked the defector. Impossible, Nechayev said. We're 3 sectors from Imperial-controlled space. Our sensors would have detected them long before. Unless they were already here, Data interrupted. Admiral, I am detecting residual tachyon emissions consistent with cloaking device discharge. But the signature is wrong for Romulan technology. I believe the 501st has developed their own cloaking capability by reverse engineering captured data. Five struggled to sit up, his face pale. No. No, no, no. I thought I had time. I thought. The medical bay doors hissed open, and 3 stormtroopers in white armor entered with weapons raised, moving with lethal precision. But it wasn't the stormtroopers that made everyone freeze. It was the figure who stepped through behind them. Lord Vader filled the doorway like a manifestation of darkness given form, his black armor drinking the red emergency lighting, his cape settling around him like folded wings. The mechanical breathing echoed off the walls, turning the medical bay into a chamber of judgment. CT 5555, Vader said, his voice carrying neither anger nor disappointment, only certainty. You have violated your oath. You have betrayed the 501st. You have demonstrated that the conditioning the Kaminoans promised was flawed after all. Fives tried to push himself up, but his injuries prevented it. I'm not a number anymore, Lord Vader. I'm not property. These people showed me that. The Federation believes clones have rights, that we're sentient beings, not manufactured soldiers. The Federation believes many foolish things. Vader moved closer to the bio-bed, and medical staff scrambled back, clearing a path. They believe freedom is more valuable than order. They believe individual choice supersedes collective purpose. They believe that every being has inherent worth, regardless of function. He stopped at the foot of the bed, and even through the mask, his regard felt crushing. Tell me, Fives, do you believe you have worth beyond your service to the 501st? Yes, Five said, and his voice held conviction despite his fear. I do. I'm not just what I was made for. I'm what I chose to become. For a long moment, Vader simply stood there, breathing. Then his hand rose, fingers curling, and Fives gasped as invisible pressure wrapped around his throat. The clone trooper's hands flew to his neck, clawing at nothing, his eyes bulging. Stop! Picard shouted, stepping forward even as stormtroopers leveled their weapons at him. Lord Vader, he surrendered. He's under Federation protection. This is murder. This is discipline, Vader corrected, his hands steady, his voice without inflection. The 501st does not tolerate desertion. The penalty is death. It has always been death. Your Federation's protection means nothing within arm's reach of the Empire. Nechayev's hand moved toward her phaser, but she was unarmed. Medical bays on starbases didn't accommodate weapons. Vader, you are aboard a Federation starbase. You have no authority here. Release him immediately or what, Admiral? Vader's helmet turned fractionally toward her, and Nechayev felt invisible pressure beginning to close around her own throat, just enough to make breathing difficult, not enough to render her unconscious. A warning. A demonstration. You will order your security forces to stand down, or I will demonstrate what happens when the Force encounters Federation arrogance. I can crush every windpipe on this starbase without moving from this spot. I can tear this station apart from the inside out. Or you can give me what I came for, and I will leave peacefully. Data's positronic brain calculated probabilities at quantum speeds. Vader was not bluffing, the energy signatures surrounding him suggested massive telekinetic potential. If he chose to act, dozens could die before security even breached the medical bay doors. But surrender meant legitimizing his authority to reclaim defectors, meant admitting the Federation couldn't protect those who sought asylum. It meant choosing between principle and pragmatism. Lord Vader, Picard said carefully, his mind racing through every diplomatic stratagem he knew, if you kill Fives, you prove everything he said about you. You prove that the 501st values obedience over morality. You prove that your order is built on fear, not respect. Is that truly the legacy you wish to establish in this universe? The pressure on Five's throat didn't lessen, but it didn't increase either. Captain Picard, you mistake me for someone who cares about legacy or moral judgment. I care about effectiveness. Fives betrayed his brothers. He stole Imperial property, that TIE fighter. He revealed classified intelligence about the 501st strategic objectives. If I allow this to stand, others will follow. Discipline will erode. The Legion will fracture. I cannot permit that. Then court-martial him, Picard countered. Under your own laws. Let your soldiers see that justice, not summary execution, governs the 501st, prove that your empire is more than thuggery with better armor. Vader's breathing filled the terrible silence. Then, slowly, his hand lowered. Fives collapsed back onto the bio bed, gasping and coughing, his throat bruised but intact. An interesting proposal, Captain. Vader's voice carried something that might have been amusement, might have been contempt. Very well. CT-5555 will face trial aboard my flagship for desertion, theft, and treason against the Empire. Federation observers will be permitted to attend, to ensure we meet your exacting standards of justice. His helmet turned back to Fives. And when he is found guilty, as he will be, the sentence will be carried out according to Imperial military law. Execution by firing squad. That's still murder, Nechayev protested, but her voice had lost its edge. They had bought Fives' time, at least. Time was something. That is military discipline, Admiral. Something your Federation seems to have forgotten in its pursuit of enlightened tolerance. Vader gestured, and the stormtroopers moved to lift Fives from the bio bed. The clone trooper didn't resist, he seemed almost relieved that death would come later rather than now, that there would be time to prepare, to make peace with his choice. As the stormtroopers carried Fives toward the door, Vader turned back to face Picard and Nechayev. Captain Picard, you and 2 observers will be permitted aboard the Executor, my flagship, in 72 hours for the court-martial. You will witness Imperial justice. You will see that the 501st maintains order through law, not chaos. And perhaps you will understand why your Federation's approach to discipline is fundamentally flawed. We'll be there, Picard said quietly. And Lord Vader. If this trial is nothing more than a show execution, if Fives doesn't receive genuine due process, the Federation will consider it an act of war. Then bring your fleet, Captain. Bring every ship you can muster. Because whether you declare war or not, the 501st will continue to establish order in this region. Your approval is neither required nor relevant. Vader moved toward the door, his stormtroopers falling in around him. 72 hours, Captain Picard. Don't be late. The Empire values punctuality. He swept from the medical bay, cape billowing, breathing echoing long after his physical form had departed. The lights flickered back to full power as his presence diminished, and slowly, the medical staff began to move again, checking equipment, tending to Admiral Nechayev's bruised throat, avoiding eye contact with the Starfleet officers who had just witnessed the Federation's principles collide with Imperial might. Picard stood at the viewport, watching as 3 star destroyers detached from the starbase and accelerated into warp, their gray hulls disappearing into the darkness between stars. Captain, Data said quietly, I calculate a 97% probability that 5s will be executed regardless of the trial's proceedings. Lord Vader's offer of Federation observation is likely strategic theater designed to legitimize his authority while demonstrating the futility of challenging Imperial discipline. I know, Data. Picard's voice was heavy. But we have to try. Because the moment we stop trying, the moment we accept that some beings are beyond the reach of justice or mercy, we become complicit in the very authoritarianism we oppose. Nechayev rubbed her throat, her expression troubled. Captain, Vader choked me from across the room. He threatened to kill everyone on this starbase. And he did it calmly, without hesitation, as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. We're not dealing with a conventional military force here. We're dealing with something the Federation has never faced before. A Dark Lord, Picard said quietly. Wounded, powerful, and absolutely convinced his way is the only way. Admiral, we need to attend that court-martial. Not because we believe we can save 5s, though we must try, but because we need to understand Lord Vader. His motivations, his limits, his vulnerabilities. If conflict is inevitable, we need every advantage we can find. And if we discover he has no vulnerabilities, Captain? What then? Picard turned from the viewport, his expression carved from determination and dread in equal measure. Then, Admiral, we'll need to become far more creative than Starfleet protocols typically allow. Because the 501st Legion is here to stay. And they're only getting stronger. 72 hours later. Shuttlecraft Galileo, approaching the ISD Executor. Captain Picard sat in the pilot's seat of the Type 6 shuttlecraft, his hands steady on the controls despite the sight that dominated the viewscreen. The Executor hung in space like a monument to military might, its wedge-shaped hull stretching over 1,600 meters from bow to stern. Turbolaser batteries tracked the small shuttle's approach with predatory precision, and TIE fighters patrolled in precise formations around the massive vessel. Beside him, Data monitored the shuttle's sensors with characteristic focus. In the passenger compartment behind them sat Counselor Troy and Lieutenant Commander Worf. Chosen because Troy could read emotional undercurrents during the trial, and Worf because his Klingon understanding of military justice might provide insights Federation officers lacked. Shuttle Galileo, a crisp Imperial voice transmitted over the comm, you are cleared for landing bay approach. Maintain current heading and reduce speed to 1/4 impulse. Any deviation will be met with immediate weapons fire. Acknowledged, Picard responded calmly. Reducing speed now. The shuttle banked smoothly, approaching the massive opening in the Star Destroyer's ventral hull where the main hangar bay gaped like a predator's mouth. As they crossed the magnetic containment field, artificial gravity took hold, and Picard set the shuttle down with practiced ease among rows of TIE fighters, Imperial shuttles, and AT-ST walkers that stood like mechanical sentinels. The landing bay was a hive of disciplined activity. Stormtroopers moved in formation, their white armor gleaming under harsh overhead lighting. Technicians in gray uniforms serviced fighters with efficient precision. Everything was clean, ordered, regimented, a machine designed for war operating at peak efficiency. Captain, Worf rumbled as they prepared to disembark, I recommend extreme caution. We are aboard an enemy vessel, surrounded by hostile forces, with no realistic means of escape if this becomes a trap. Noted, Mr. Worf. Picard stood, straightening his uniform. But we gave our word we would attend. And perhaps observing the 501st in their own environment will provide intelligence we couldn't acquire otherwise. The shuttle's hatch hissed open, and a blast of recycled air, warmer than Federation standard, carrying the scent of machinery and ozone, washed over them. An Imperial officer waited at the base of the ramp, flanked by 6 stormtroopers. The officer wore the rank insignia of a commander, his uniform immaculate, his posture rigid with military bearing. Captain Picard, the commander said, his voice clipped and professional. I am Commander Pragi, Executive Officer of the Executor. Lord Vader extends his hospitality. You and your officers will follow me to the court-martial chamber. I must inform you that you are prohibited from accessing any areas beyond the designated route, prohibited from recording or scanning Imperial systems, and prohibited from interfering in the proceedings. Violation of these terms will result in your immediate detention and ejection from Imperial space. Understood, Commander. Picard descended the ramp, Troy, Data, and Worf following. We are here to observe, nothing more. Pragi turned sharply and began walking, the stormtroopers falling in around the Federation officers in a formation that was escort and imprisonment in equal measure. As they moved through the Star Destroyer's corridors, Picard catalogued details with the practiced eye of a starship captain. The corridors were wider than Enterprise standards, built to accommodate the movement of large numbers of troops. Every surface was gunmetal gray, utilitarian, designed for function over aesthetics. Control panels used a combination of physical switches and holographic displays, less advanced than Federation touchscreen interfaces, but more resistant to electromagnetic disruption. Crew members they passed stood at attention, eyes forward, acknowledging superior officers with crisp salutes. Impressive discipline, Worf observed quietly. Even Klingon warships rarely maintain such perfect order. It is more than discipline, Lieutenant, Data replied, his eyes tracking everything. It is conditioning. Notice the crew's movements, identical stride length, identical posture, minimal verbal communication. This is a military force where individual variation has been systematically eliminated in favor of collective efficiency. Troy's empathic senses were working overtime, and she felt almost overwhelmed by the emotional uniformity. Captain, I'm sensing something disturbing. The clone troopers, they all feel the same. Not identical thoughts, but identical emotional structures. Fear of failure, pride in service, and beneath it all, a kind of emptiness. As if they're waiting for someone to tell them what to feel. The result of genetic conditioning and psychological programming, Pragi said without turning, apparently having overheard. The Kaminoans bred the perfect soldiers, loyal, capable, obedient. Everything a military force requires. Your Federation's reliance on volunteers with individual motivations creates inconsistency, unpredictability, weakness. It also creates innovation, Commander, Picard countered. Soldiers who think for themselves adapt to unexpected situations more effectively than those who simply follow orders. An interesting theory, Captain. The 501 ST's combat record suggests otherwise. They entered a turbolift, and Pragi keyed a destination. The lift descended, or ascended, it was difficult to tell aboard the massive vessel, for nearly 30 seconds before opening onto a corridor that terminated in massive double doors flanked by 4 royal guards in crimson armor and flowing capes. The court-martial chamber, Pragi announced. Lord Vader is already in attendance. You will observe from the designated gallery. You will not speak unless addressed directly. You will render judgment on nothing. Is this understood? Perfectly, Commander. The doors opened, revealing a chamber that was part courtroom, part throne room. The space was circular, perhaps 30 meters in diameter, with a raised platform at the center where a simple chair, not quite a throne, but close, dominated the room. Lord Vader sat there, his black armor stark against the gray walls, his breathing filling the chamber like a heartbeat. To Vader's right stood a row of Imperial officers, captains, commanders, specialists in military law. To his left, 3 clone troopers in modified armor bearing the distinctive blue markings of the 501st, representatives of the rank and file, witnesses to their brother's judgment. And in the center, standing alone in a circle marked on the floor, was Fives. The clone trooper still bore visible injuries from his crash landing and Vader's force choke. He wore simple gray fatigues rather than armor, stripped of rank and designation. But his posture was straight, his eyes clear, his expression defiant despite the fear that Troy could sense radiating from him. Picard and his officers were directed to a gallery overlooking the proceedings, caged seating that allowed observation but prevented interference. As they took their positions, Vader's helmet turned fractionally in acknowledgement. "Captain Picard," Vader's mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "You honor us with your presence. You will witness that the Galactic Empire, even in exile, maintains the rule of law. Justice will be served here today." "I certainly hope so, Lord Vader," Picard replied carefully. Vader rose from his chair with deliberate slowness, his cape settling around him as he descended the platform to stand before Fives. The clone trooper held his ground, though every instinct must have screamed to flee. "CT 5555, Vader began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You stand accused of desertion in the face of the enemy, theft of Imperial military property, and treason against the Galactic Empire. How do you plead?" Fives lifted his chin. "Guilty of desertion, Lord Vader. Guilty of theft. But not guilty of treason. You can't commit treason against an empire that no longer exists." A murmur rippled through the assembled Imperial officers. Vader raised a hand, and silence fell like a guillotine blade. "Explain your reasoning, CT 5555. "We're cut off from our galaxy, Lord Vader. The Emperor can't give orders from across dimensional barriers. The empire we served is gone, at least from our perspective. So who are we serving now? What are we fighting for? You say order, but whose order? Yours? The Empire's? Or just the idea of order, imposed because it's all we know how to do?" Vader's breathing filled the pause. "You question the chain of command. I question the purpose, Lord Vader. I was bred to serve the Republic, then told to serve the Empire. I followed orders without question because that's what I was made for. But then we came here, to this universe, and for the first time, I met people who said I could choose. That I wasn't just a number, a manufactured soldier. That I had value beyond my function." Fives' voice grew stronger. "The Federation showed me that being made for a purpose doesn't mean I can't define my own purpose. That's not treason, Lord Vader. That's freedom." The Imperial officers looked to Vader, awaiting his response. The clone trooper representatives stood rigid, their expressions unreadable behind their helmets. And in the gallery, Picard leaned forward, watching Vader's reaction with intense focus. "Freedom," Vader said slowly, testing the word as if it were foreign. "CT 5555, let me tell you about freedom. I was born a slave on a desert world where freedom meant choosing which master would own you. I was freed by Jedi Knights who spoke of liberation while binding me to their code, their philosophy, their war. I was promised freedom through power, through mastering the Force, through becoming more than human. And I learned that freedom is an illusion, a comforting lie we tell ourselves to pretend our choices matter." He moved closer to Fives, and the clone trooper visibly struggled not to step back. "You were bred for purpose, CT 5555. The Kaminoans gave you life, but they gave you meaning. You were part of something greater than yourself. An army that protected the Republic, then enforced the Empire's peace. You had brothers who trusted you, commanders who relied on you, a place in the galaxy's order. And you threw that away for the Federation's empty promises of individual worth and self-determination." Fives met Vader's eyeless gaze. Maybe, Lord Vader. But I'd rather die free than live as a tool. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Vader stood there, breathing, and Troy felt a surge of emotion from him. Rage, yes, but also something unexpected. Recognition. Pain. As if Five's words had struck deeper than any weapon could. You would rather die free, Vader repeated quietly. Then you are a fool, CT 5555. Because death is the ultimate slavery, the one chain no philosophy or rebellion can break. The Empire offers you immortality through service. Your sacrifice, your loyalty, your dedication, these things echo beyond your lifespan. You become part of something eternal. But individual freedom? That dies with you, leaving nothing but forgotten dust. At least it's my dust, Lord Vader. Not the Empire's. Not yours. Mine. Worf leaned toward Picard, his voice barely a whisper. Captain, this clone has honor. He faces death with courage and conviction. If Vader executes him, he will prove the Federation's argument about the value of individual choice. Or prove his own argument about the futility of it, Picard whispered back. Watch carefully, Mr. Worf. This is about more than Five's guilt. This is about what the 501st becomes in this universe. Whether they remain instruments of Vader's will, or whether they evolve into something else. Vader turned away from Fives, addressing the assembled officers and clone representatives. The charges are proven by the accused's own admission. CT 5555 deserted his post, stole Imperial property, and sought asylum with our enemies. The law is clear. The penalty is death. He paused, and a breathing filled the chamber. However, the law also permits consideration of mitigating circumstances. CT 5555 argues that the Empire no longer exists, that the chain of command has been broken by dimensional separation. This argument has merit. The Imperial officers exchanged shocked glances. This was not the summary judgment they expected. We are far from our galaxy, Vader continued, his voice carrying a weight of something almost like uncertainty. The Emperor cannot provide guidance. Imperial law, written for a unified galaxy, may not apply perfectly to our current situation. CT 5555 raises a question we must all face. What is the 501st Legion now? Are we still bound by Empire protocols, or must we adapt to new circumstances? Commander Pragi stepped forward. Lord Vader, with respect, the law is the law, regardless of circumstances. To suggest otherwise is to invite chaos. If we permit questioning of the chain of command, if we allow individual soldiers to determine their own loyalties, the Legion will fracture. We must maintain discipline or risk losing everything. I agree, Commander. Discipline must be maintained. Vader turned back to Fives. But discipline without purpose is merely ritual. The Empire gave us purpose, order across the galaxy, peace through strength, stability through unity. Here, in this universe, we must ask ourselves, do we serve that purpose, or do we serve the Emperor? The question hung in the air like a suspended sentence. Data's positronic brain processed the implications at quantum speed. Captain, Lord Vader is questioning the foundation of his own authority. If the 501st serves the Empire's purpose rather than the Emperor's person, it creates philosophical space for adaptation and change. But if they serve only the Emperor, then their purpose in this universe is undefined, making them vulnerable to exactly the kind of doubt Fives represents. He's testing them, Picard realized. Testing whether his soldiers can think for themselves while still maintaining discipline. It's a dangerous game, give them too much freedom and they fracture. Give them too little and they become brittle, unable to adapt. One of the clone trooper representatives stepped forward, removing his helmet to reveal a face scarred from dozens of battles. Lord Vader, permission to speak. Granted, Commander Cody. CT 5555 was my brother. We were bred from the same template, trained in the same facilities, fought in the same campaigns. I know him. Cody's voice was rough with emotion. Real emotion, not manufactured conditioning. He's not a traitor, Lord Vader. He's confused. We all are. We were made to serve the Republic, then told to serve the Empire. We followed orders because that's what we do. But now. He looked at Fives with something like compassion. Now we don't know what we're fighting for, and that scares us more than any enemy. Vader regarded Cody with what might have been approval. You are honest, Commander. That is, valuable. He turned back to Fives. CT 5555, you will not be executed. But you will not be freed either. Your punishment is this: you will serve the 501st Legion in a non-combat capacity. No armor. No weapons. No rank. You will work in engineering, in medical, wherever your skills serve the Legion's needs. You will witness what we build here, in this universe. And when you finally understand what the 501st truly represents, when you see that order and purpose need not come from an emperor but can be forged by those who enforce it, then, and only then, will you be permitted to return to active duty or choose exile. The chamber erupted in murmurs. The Imperial officers looked uncertain. The clone representative seemed almost relieved. And Fives simply stood there, stunned. You're sparing me? Fives said, disbelief coloring his voice. I am giving you the opportunity to prove your worth beyond genetic conditioning, CT 5555. The Federation believes you possess individual value. Very well. Demonstrate it. Show me that a clone trooper can choose purpose and still maintain discipline. Prove that freedom and order are not mutually exclusive. Vader's voice dropped to something almost quiet. Or prove that the Federation fills empty heads with empty promises that collapse under reality's weight. Either way, you will serve as a lesson to the Legion. Picard rose from his seat in the gallery, drawing Vader's attention. Lord Vader, may I speak? You may, Captain Picard. I suspect you have opinions about my judgment. I do. Lord Vader, you've demonstrated something today that I did not expect. The capacity for mercy. For recognizing that rigid adherence to law without consideration of circumstance is tyranny, not justice. You've shown your soldiers that the 501st can evolve while maintaining discipline. That is, commendable. Do not mistake strategic flexibility for sentimentality, Captain. I spared CT 5555 because executing him would create a martyr, would validate the doubt spreading through the Legion. Better to demonstrate that questioning can be acknowledged, addressed, and redirected toward productive purpose. Vader's helmet tilted slightly. But make no mistake, if he fails, if he proves the Federation's philosophy hollow, I will execute him myself. And his death will carry far more weight than this trial ever could. I understand, Lord Vader. May I request permission to speak with Fives? Not now, but in the coming weeks. To ensure he receives fair treatment under your restructured service conditions. Vader considered this for a long moment. Denied, Captain. CT 5555 will be isolated from Federation influence while he determines his path. However, he gestured to Commander Pragi. Commander, you will provide Captain Picard with weekly status reports on CT 5555's progress. Transparency, Captain, to demonstrate that the 501st has nothing to hide from Federation scrutiny. That is acceptable, Lord Vader. Thank you. As the court-martial proceedings formally concluded and Fives was led away by clone troopers who looked at him with a mixture of confusion and curiosity, Vader approached the gallery where the Federation officers stood. Captain Picard, you came expecting to witness Imperial barbarism. Did I disappoint you? Picard met that faceless gaze without flinching. You surprised me, Lord Vader. But I'm not certain whether that makes you more or less dangerous. A tyrant who recognizes the value of adaptation is far harder to oppose than one who rigidly clings to dogma. Then perhaps we understand each other better than either of us would prefer, Captain. Vader turned toward the chamber doors. Commander Pragi will escort you back to your shuttle. Our business here is concluded. Lord Vader, Troy said suddenly, her empathic courage overriding her caution. I sensed something during the trial. Pain. Genuine pain when Five spoke about choosing freedom over servitude. As if his words reminded you of something you lost. Or something you chose to abandon. The chamber fell silent. Every Imperial officer present tensed, expecting explosive rage at this psychological intrusion. But Vader simply stood there, breathing. Your empathic abilities are formidable, Counselor Troy. And invasive. But, not entirely incorrect. He did not turn to face her. I made a choice once, long ago. Between freedom and power. Between love and duty. Between who I was and what I needed to become. I chose power. I chose duty. I chose to become Lord Vader and leave behind the man I was. The breathing filled another pause. Sometimes, in the dark hours between missions, I wonder if I chose correctly. But wondering changes nothing. We are what our choices make us, Counselor. And I chose this. He swept from the chamber without another word, cape billowing, breathing echoing long after his physical form had disappeared. Troy sagged slightly, the emotional weight of that admission almost overwhelming. Captain, he's more complex than we thought. There's a person beneath that armor, wounded, conflicted, buried under layers of pain and purpose. But still there. Which makes him more dangerous, not less, Worf observed. A monster is predictable. A person who has chosen to become a monster is not. As Commander Pragi escorted them back to their shuttle, Picard found himself replaying Vader's words. We are what our choices make us. A philosophy not so different from Federation principles, but taken to its darkest conclusion. The Federation believed choices should be informed by compassion and ethics. Vader believed choices should be informed by power and effectiveness. Two paths, diverging from similar origins. The question was which path would prove sustainable when tested against the chaos of reality. As the Galileo lifted off from the Executor's hangar bay and accelerated back toward Federation space, Picard watched the Star Destroyer recede on the viewscreen. Data, analysis. Fascinating, Captain. Lord Vader demonstrated strategic thinking beyond mere military tactics. He transformed a potential martyrdom into a psychological experiment that serves multiple purposes, maintaining discipline, addressing doubt within the ranks, demonstrating adaptability to Federation observers, and establishing himself as more than simply an enforcer of rigid law. The 501st is evolving under his leadership from a clone army into something potentially more formidable, a military force that thinks. And if they start thinking, Picard said quietly, they might start questioning more than just Five's desertion. They might start questioning everything. Including Vader's authority. Precisely, Captain. Lord Vader has initiated a process he may not be able to control. The question is whether he recognizes this risk or believes he can manage it through force of will. Picard leaned back in his seat, exhaustion settling over him. We need to report this to Admiral Nechayev. The 501st Legion is more dangerous than we thought. Not because they're brutal, but because they're adaptable. They learn. They evolve. And that makes them a threat the Federation may not be prepared to face. As the shuttle jumped to warp, leaving the Executor behind, none of them noticed the small Imperial probe that had attached itself to the Galileo's hull during their departure, a listening device so sophisticated that even Data's sensors had missed it. Lord Vader watched their shuttle disappear from his command chair, Commander Pragi standing at attention beside him. Lord Vader, why did you truly spare the traitor? The Legion expects discipline. Because, Commander, the Legion needs to evolve or it will die. We cannot return home. We cannot sustain ourselves on fear alone. We need soldiers who choose to serve, not merely obey. CT-5555 will be our test case. Vader's fist clenched slowly. And the Federation will help us whether they intend to or not. They have shown us the value of individual choice. We will demonstrate that choice and order are not enemies, but tools to be wielded by those strong enough to master both. And if the experiment fails, my lord, then we will have learned a valuable lesson, Commander. And CT-5555 will serve as a warning to others who mistake philosophy for reality. The breathing filled the silence, eternal and mechanical, as the executor adjusted course toward its next objective. A star system rich in resources and home to a pre-warp civilization that would soon learn what Imperial order truly meant. Stardate 43821.6. USS Enterprise D, en route to the Corvin system. Captain Picard stood in his ready room, staring at the data PADD in his hand with mounting dread. The report from Starfleet Intelligence was 3 weeks old, delayed by subspace relay failures and bureaucratic channels, but its contents were no less alarming for the delay. The 501st Legion had made contact with the Borg. And both sides had survived. "Come," Picard called in response to the door chime. Commander Riker entered, his expression grim. "Captain, we're receiving a Priority 1 transmission from Admiral Nechayev. She's ordering us to rendezvous with a Starfleet task force assembling at Starbase 234. Apparently, the situation with Lord Vader has escalated beyond diplomatic resolution." Picard set down the PADD. "The Borg encounter?" "That's part of it, sir. But there's more. Intelligence reports indicate Vader has been experimenting with dimensional rift technology. 3 days ago, sensors detected a massive subspace disruption in the Felton system, uninhabited, but strategically located near both Romulan and Cardassian space. The disruption lasted 47 seconds before collapsing. When it cleared, the entire fourth planet was gone. Gone." Picard's voice was sharp. "Destroyed?" "No, sir. Gone. As in removed from local spacetime." Data analyzed the sensor logs. He believes Vader attempted to create a controlled dimensional bridge and accidentally tore a hole in reality large enough to pull an entire planet through to somewhere else. The spatial coordinates where the planet should be now register as a null point. A place where the laws of physics break down. Picard felt cold settle into his bones. He's willing to destroy entire worlds trying to get home. Or he's learning, Captain. Data thinks the experiment was partially successful, the rift opened, which means the principle is sound. Vader just needs to refine the execution. And if he figures out how to stabilize a dimensional bridge, then he returns to his empire with knowledge of our universe, our technology, our weaknesses. Picard moved to the viewport, watching the stars streak past at warp speed. And the Empire returns the favor with an invasion force we cannot possibly repel. Number 1, what's the status of the Borg encounter? Riker called up tactical data on the Ready Room's display. 2 weeks ago, a Borg cube entered Imperial-controlled space, Sector 441, where Vader established his primary mining operations. The cube followed standard Borg protocol: hail, demand surrender, prepare to assimilate. Vader responded by engaging with all 3 star destroyers simultaneously. The display showed grainy sensor footage recovered from a Ferengi trading vessel that had been passing through the region. 3 star destroyers in delta formation, their turbolasers firing in synchronized patterns against the distinctive green energy beams of Borg cutting lasers. The cube's shields adapted within seconds, rendering the Imperial weapons largely ineffective. Standard Borg adaptation, Picard observed. Their shields modulate to compensate for energy frequency. Turbolasers would become increasingly useless after the first few volleys. That's what we thought, sir. But Vader didn't use standard tactics. Riker advanced the footage. He ordered his fleet to cease fire after the Borg adapted. Then, this. The image showed Lord Vader's flagship approaching the cube at close range, dangerously close, within transporter range. Borg drones would have beamed aboard by the thousands, overwhelming any conventional defense. But something happened that Starfleet sensors couldn't fully explain. The cube's surface rippled. Sections of its hull buckled inward as if crushed by invisible hands. Borg drones attempting to beam aboard the Executor simply stopped materializing. Their molecular patterns scattered mid-transport, torn apart by some kind of interference that Federation science couldn't identify. The Force, Picard said quietly. He used the Force against them. That's Data's theory, sir. Whatever this Force is, it operates on principles the Borg couldn't immediately adapt to. They tried to assimilate his telekinetic abilities, but you can't assimilate something that isn't technological. The Collective's adaptive protocols are built around analyzing and countering physical or energy-based threats. They've never encountered something like directed willpower made manifest. The footage continued. The Borg cube, unable to assimilate the Imperial fleet, unable to adapt to Vader's force attacks, made a tactical decision that shocked both Riker and Picard. It retreated. The Borg don't retreat, Picard said, disbelief coloring his voice. They adapt or they're destroyed. They never withdraw. Except they did this time, Captain. Data analyzed the encounter and believes the Collective made a strategic calculation. Vader's abilities represented an unknown variable, something that could potentially damage the Collective's unity if assimilated improperly. Rather than risk introducing chaos into the hive mind, they withdrew to analyze the data and develop countermeasures. Which means they'll return, Picard concluded grimly. And when they do, they'll have adapted. They'll find a way to counter the Force, assimilate Vader's knowledge, and add his strategic capabilities to the Collective. We'll face the Borg with Force abilities. Admiral Nechayev reached the same conclusion, sir. She's assembling a task force to contain the 501st before they become an even greater threat. 12 star ships, including 3 Galaxy-class vessels. The mission parameters are clear: neutralize Lord Vader's dimensional rift experiments, prevent further Borg encounters, and if necessary, disable the Imperial fleet by whatever means required. Picard turned from the viewport, his expression troubled. Number 1, we're talking about a military strike against a force that has, so far, not directly attacked Federation worlds. Yes, they've seized uninhabited systems. Yes, they've extracted tribute from passing vessels. And yes, Vader's experiments pose catastrophic risks. But a preemptive strike? That violates everything the Federation stands for. Captain, with respect, what alternative do we have? We've tried diplomacy. We've tried containment. Vader's growing stronger every week. His clone troopers are adapting to this universe. His ships are integrating captured Federation technology. And now he's learned he can fight the Borg to a standstill. If we don't act now, while we still have numerical superiority, we may not get another chance. Before Picard could respond, his comm badge chirped. Bridge to Captain Picard. Go ahead, Mr. Data. Captain, we are detecting a distress signal from the Federation colony on Corvin 2. The colony reports an Imperial vessel in orbit and armed troops landing on the surface. Lord Vader is demanding the colony surrender all dilithium reserves and technological databases, or he will occupy the colony by force. Picard and Riker exchanged glances. This was the line they'd been dreading, the moment when Vader's resource acquisition moved from uninhabited space to Federation territory. How long until we reach Corvin 2, Mr. Data? At current warp speed, 17 minutes, Captain. Increase to maximum warp. And Mr. Data, alert Starfleet Command. Tell them the situation has escalated to active hostilities. The 501st has just invaded a Federation world. Corvin 2, Colonial Administration Center. Governor Marcus Chen stood in his office, trying to project calm authority while his hands shook with suppressed fear. Through the window, he could see the Star Destroyer in orbit, a gray wedge of military might that dwarfed the small orbital defense platforms the colony maintained. On the ground, 4 AT-ST walkers patrolled the streets of the colony's main settlement, their mechanical footsteps echoing like thunder. And in his office, standing like a shadow-given form, was Lord Vader. "Governor Chen," Vader's mechanical voice filled the room, "I will ask once more. Provide access to your dilithium mining facilities and transfer all technological specifications for your colony's infrastructure. Comply, and your people will be unharmed. Resist, and I will take what I require by force." Chen swallowed hard, trying to remember the diplomatic training every colonial administrator received. "Lord Vader, Corvin II is a Federation world. We are protected by Starfleet and bound by Federation law. I cannot simply surrender our resources to an occupying force. If you require dilithium, I can arrange trade negotiations through proper channels. I do not negotiate with subordinates, Governor. I issue orders. You will comply or be removed from authority." Vader's hand rose slightly, and Chen felt invisible pressure begin to close around his throat. Not enough to choke, just enough to demonstrate the futility of resistance. "Your Starfleet is 17 minutes away. In that time, my forces can secure every strategic asset on this colony, extract the data we require, and be prepared to defend our position. Or you can save your people unnecessary suffering and cooperate." Chen's deputy administrator, a young woman named Sarah Tovan, stepped forward with more courage than sense. "This is an act of war, Lord Vader. The Federation doesn't respond well to conquest. You may have the firepower to take this colony, but Starfleet will mobilize hundreds of ships against you. You're one fleet against an entire interstellar government. The mathematics don't favor you." Vader's helmet turned toward her with the slow precision of a predator identifying prey. "You speak of mathematics, Administrator Tovan. Allow me to educate you. The Federation has approximately 240 starships stationed within 10 sectors of this location. Of those, perhaps 60 could reach Corvin II within 48 hours. Of those 60, fewer than 20 possess the firepower to meaningfully threaten a Star Destroyer in direct combat." He moved toward the window, his cape settling around him. "The Borg taught me a valuable lesson recently, that overwhelming force means nothing if your enemy cannot adapt. The Federation is predictable. You will protest, mobilize diplomatic channels, attempt to isolate me politically. But you will not fire first because doing so violates your principles. And that hesitation will cost you this colony." Sarah's fists clenched. "You're wrong about us. The Federation has fought the Borg, the Dominion, the Romulans. We've survived conflicts that would have destroyed lesser civilizations. We know how to fight when we must. But you must exhaust every alternative before fighting becomes acceptable," Vader countered. "By the time your principles permit lethal force, I will have fortified my position beyond your capacity to dislodge me without unacceptable casualties. Your compassion is admirable, Administrator. It is also a fatal weakness." Governor Chen found his voice despite the fear. "Lord Vader, what do you actually want? Not just dilithium and data, what's your endgame? You've claimed 7 systems, extracted resources from dozens of passing ships, and now you're occupying a Federation colony. But to what end? You can't go home. You can't sustain a galactic empire with 3 ships. What are you really trying to accomplish?" For a long moment, Vader simply breathed, the mechanical rhythm filling the office like a ticking clock. "I want what I have always wanted, Governor Chen. Order. Purpose. A galaxy where chaos does not reign, where the strong protect the weak, where law governs instead of sentiment." He turned from the window. "Your Federation speaks of these ideals, but you implement them with weakness. You allow pre-warp civilizations to destroy themselves rather than intervene. You permit criminal enterprises to flourish because dismantling them might require methods you find distasteful. You preach equality while allowing the Ferengi to practice slavery, the Cardassians to occupy and abuse entire species, the Romulans to assassinate and manipulate without consequence. Because we respect sovereignty, Chen argued. Because forcing our values on other cultures is imperialism, not enlightenment. The Prime Directive exists to prevent us from becoming conquerors who believe our way is the only way. And while you respect their sovereignty, Governor, how many beings suffer? How many civilizations collapse into barbarism? How many preventable tragedies occur because the Federation prioritizes principle over results? Vader's fist clenched. The Empire did not wait for suffering to resolve itself. We acted. We imposed order, and yes, we used force. But we saved more lives than your Prime Directive ever will. Sarah stepped between Vader and the Governor, her fear overcome by righteous anger. You're rationalizing tyranny, Lord Vader. Dressing up conquest and oppression as humanitarian intervention. The Empire you served committed genocide against entire species. You personally led campaigns that killed millions. Don't lecture us about saving lives when your hands are drenched in blood. The office lights flickered. Equipment sparked. And everyone in the room felt the temperature drop as invisible pressure built in the air itself. Choose your next words carefully, Administrator Tovan, Vader said, his voice dropping to something even more dangerous than before. I have sacrificed more than you can comprehend in service to order. I have become a monster so that monsters would fear me. I have killed, yes, because killing is sometimes necessary to prevent greater death. Your Federation's philosophy works in peaceful times, among civilized species willing to cooperate. But when faced with true evil, with chaos that cannot be reasoned with or contained by laws, your principles collapse. You become victims or you become what you claim to oppose. Or we find a third way, Chen said quietly. Lord Vader, I believe you genuinely want to create order. But order imposed by fear is not sustainable. When you leave this colony, when your Star Destroyers move to the next system, what prevents everything you've built from collapsing? Only more fear. More force. An endless cycle of oppression and rebellion. The Federation's way takes longer, requires more patience, but it creates lasting change because people choose to participate rather than being forced. Before Vader could respond, a stormtrooper entered the office with crisp efficiency. Lord Vader, sensors detect a Federation starship dropping out of warp. Galaxy-class vessel, identified as the USS Enterprise. They're hailing us, my lord. Captain Picard demands we withdraw from the colony immediately. Vader turned to the window, where the distinctive saucer section of the Enterprise D was visible in the upper atmosphere, descending toward the colony with purpose. Captain Picard. Predictable as always. Commander, signal the executor, prepare for potential combat operations. But do not fire unless fired upon. Lord Vader, Chen said urgently, please don't let this escalate into violence. Withdraw now, and we can negotiate a peaceful resolution. Continue this occupation, and you force Starfleet to respond with force. Governor Chen, I appreciate your concern. But I will not withdraw until I have secured the resources necessary for the 501st's continued operations. If Captain Picard wishes to prevent that, he is welcome to try. Captain, the executor is powering weapons, Worf reported, his voice tight with combat readiness. The AD-ST walkers on the surface are taking defensive positions around the colony's primary dilithium storage facility. Lord Vader is not withdrawing. Picard stood in the center of the bridge, every eye turned toward him, waiting for the order that would determine whether this confrontation ended in diplomacy or bloodshed. Mr. Worf, target the executor's weapons arrays. Precise targeting only, I want to disable, not destroy. Prepare to fire on my command. Captain, Troy said softly from her position beside him, I'm sensing Lord Vader's presence even from this distance. He's calm. Absolutely calm. As if this is exactly what he expected. What he wanted. Of course he wanted this, Riker muttered. He's forcing our hand. Make us fire first, and he claims we're the aggressors. Turn us into the villains in his narrative. Then we must be very careful not to fall into that trap. Number 1. Picard opened a channel. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise to Lord Vader. You are in violation of Federation sovereignty. Withdraw your forces from Corvin 2 immediately, or we will be forced to remove them. Vader's mechanical voice filled the bridge, transmitted across all frequencies. Captain Picard, I am extracting resources the 501st requires for survival. Your colony has excess dilithium capacity. I am requisitioning a portion, not seizing all of it. This is pragmatic resource allocation, not conquest. It is theft, Lord Vader, regardless of how you frame it. And it will not stand. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawing your ground forces, or I will open fire on your walkers. A pause, filled only by Vader's breathing. Captain Picard, you would fire on my forces to defend property? Not lives, property. Your principles bend quickly when resources are at stake. I am defending a Federation colony's right to sovereignty, Lord Vader. The distinction matters. Does it? Very well, Captain. I propose an alternative. You and I, face to face, planetside. We discuss terms. If you can convince me that the Federation's claim to this dilithium is more legitimate than the 501st's need for survival, I will withdraw. If you cannot, you will permit me to complete my operations and depart peacefully. No bloodshed. No casualties. Just, conversation. Riker immediately objected. Captain, it's a trap. He'll take you hostage or worse. Mr. Data, analysis. Data's golden eyes processed probabilities. Captain, there is a 68% probability that Lord Vader intends to engage you in philosophical debate rather than physical confrontation. His prior encounters suggest he values ideological victory as much as tactical success. However, there remains a 32% probability of treachery or violence. Picard considered the odds, the stakes, the lives hanging in the balance. I'm willing to take that risk. Mr. Worf, you have the bridge. If I am not back in 1 hour, or if Lord Vader makes any hostile move against the colony, you are authorized to fire on Imperial positions. Number 1, you're with me. Captain. That's an order, Will. If this goes wrong, I need someone down there who can think on their feet and fight their way out. Besides, Picard's expression held grim determination. If Lord Vader wants a philosophical debate about the nature of order and freedom, I'm happy to oblige. Perhaps it's time we settled this with words before circumstances force us to settle it with weapons. As Picard and Riker headed for the transporter room, Troy caught the captain's arm. Captain, be careful. I'm sensing something from Vader, a kind of anticipation. As if this conversation is what he's been waiting for since he arrived in our universe. As if everything until now has been prologue. Then let's hope the main story has a better ending than the setup suggests, Counselor. Moments later, Picard and Riker materialized in the Corvin 2 Colonial Plaza, where Lord Vader stood waiting like a monument to darkness, his black armor stark against the midday sun. The confrontation that would determine the 501st Legion's future, and possibly the Federation's, was about to begin. The Colonial Plaza of Corvin 2 was a modest affair, a public square surrounded by administrative buildings constructed in the utilitarian Federation style, with native plants cultivated in careful beds to honor the world's original ecosystem. Colonists had gathered at the edges of the plaza, held back by nervous security personnel, watching with a mixture of fear and fascination as two philosophies prepared to collide. Captain Picard materialized 10 meters from Lord Vader, Commander Riker appearing beside him with hand resting on his phaser. Around the plaza's perimeter, 8 stormtroopers stood in perfect formation, their E-11 blasters held at parade rest but easily accessible. Above them, the Star Destroyer Executor hung like a sword of Damocles, its shadow touching the edge of the settlement. Vader stood with hands clasped behind his back, cape settling around him in the light breeze, breathing steady and mechanical. The visual contrast was stark. Picard in his clean Starfleet uniform, representing enlightenment and cooperation, versus Vader in black armor, representing power and absolute authority. "Captain Picard," Vader's voice echoed across the plaza. "You came unarmed, I trust." "I came in good faith, Lord Vader. Though Commander Riker is armed, as your stormtroopers are. A reasonable precaution on both sides." "Agreed. Commander Riker, your reputation precedes you. The 501ST's intelligence network indicates you are a skilled tactician and a man of action. I respect that." Vader's helmet turned fractionally toward Riker. "But this conversation is between philosophers, not warriors. You may observe, but do not interfere unless your captain's life is threatened." Riker's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. Vader gestured to a bench near the center of the plaza. Simple, made of local wood, designed for colonists to rest and enjoy their settlement. "Shall we sit, Captain? This may take some time." The absurdity of the image, Lord Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, sitting on a park bench to debate philosophy, was not lost on Picard. But he moved to the bench and sat, maintaining his dignity despite the surreal circumstances. Vader lowered himself onto the other end with surprising grace for someone encased in armor, his cape draping over the bench's back. For a moment, they simply sat there, two leaders from different universes, breathing the same air under the same sun. "Captain Picard," Vader began, "you object to my presence on this colony. You claim I am violating sovereignty, committing theft, engaging in acts of war. But let me ask you a question. How is what I am doing substantively different from what your Federation does routinely?" Picard's eyebrow rose. "I beg your pardon. Your Federation maintains strategic resource reserves. You extract minerals, deuterium, dilithium from worlds you have claimed. You establish colonies on planets that were previously uninhabited, imposing your presence on ecosystems without their consent, if an ecosystem could consent. You build starbases in neutral space and declare them Federation territory. How is this not conquest dressed in the language of exploration? The difference, Lord Vader, is consent and mutual benefit. Federation colonies are established by volunteers who choose to participate. We terraform and develop worlds in ways that preserve native ecosystems wherever possible. We form alliances with indigenous species rather than subjugating them. And we contribute to the greater good, sharing resources, knowledge, and protection among all member worlds. This is cooperation, not domination. Cooperation built on a foundation of overwhelming military and economic power," Vader countered. "The Federation maintains the second largest fleet in the quadrant, exceeded only by the Klingon Empire. You have photon torpedoes that can destroy cities, phasers that can reduce entire regions to glass, the capacity to render worlds uninhabitable. You negotiate from a position of strength and call it diplomacy. But remove that strength, Captain, and how many of your allies would remain loyal?" Picard leaned forward slightly. "Many, if not all. Because our alliances are built on shared values and mutual respect, not fear. When the Borg attacked, our allies rallied to defend Earth because they believed in what the Federation represents, not because they feared our reprisal if they didn't. Did they?" Vader's helmet tilted. "Or did they recognize that if Earth fell, they would be next? That the Borg represented a threat to their own survival, and the Federation was their best defense? Fear of a common enemy is still fear, Captain. You simply outsource it to external threats rather than generating it yourself. You're conflating pragmatic alliance with intimidation, Lord Vader. Yes, species join the Federation partly for mutual defense. But they also join because we offer something no empire based on fear can provide, genuine partnership. A voice in their own governance. The knowledge that their children will grow up in a society that values diversity, exploration, and peaceful coexistence. The empire you served offered none of that. Vader was silent for a long moment, his breathing the only sound in the plaza. Colonial onlookers leaned forward, straining to hear every word of this extraordinary debate. You speak of diversity and coexistence as unqualified virtues, Captain. But diversity without unity is chaos. The Federation preaches tolerance, but what happens when member species' values fundamentally contradict? When Vulcan logic conflicts with human emotion? When Klingon honor demands actions the Federation prohibits? You impose your values through cultural pressure and diplomatic manipulation, then congratulate yourselves for not using force. We negotiate those contradictions through democratic process, Picard replied. Through the Federation Council, where all member worlds have representation. Yes, it's messy. Yes, it requires compromise. But the alternative, imposing a single worldview on billions of diverse beings, is tyranny, regardless of how efficient it may be. Is it tyranny if that single worldview demonstrably produces superior results? If it saves more lives, prevents more suffering, creates more stability than your democratic chaos? Vader's hand gestured toward the colony. This settlement has existed for 6 years. In that time, how many disputes have you mediated? How many regulations have you implemented? How much bureaucracy has been required just to mine the lithium and maintain basic infrastructure? Approximately 43 disputes, most resolved through arbitration, Picard answered honestly. Standard Federation regulations for colonial development, resource extraction, and environmental protection. And yes, bureaucracy, because we believe in oversight, in checks and balances that prevent abuse of power. Exactly. Inefficiency built into the system as a feature, not a bug. Now imagine this colony under Imperial administration. A governor appointed based on competence, not popularity. Clear regulations established and enforced uniformly. Disputes resolved by a single authority with the power to make binding decisions. Resources extracted efficiently and allocated according to strategic priorities. No endless debates. No paralysis by committee. Just order, implemented with precision and maintained through strength. Picard's voice hardened. And when that governor is corrupt? When those clear regulations favor the powerful over the weak? When disputes are resolved unjustly because no one dares challenge the single authority? Your efficiency comes at the cost of justice, Lord Vader. Your order is purchased with oppression. Only if the authority is corrupted, Captain. An enlightened despot can accomplish more good than 100 democratic committees. The Emperor brought peace to a galaxy that had been torn apart by sectarian conflicts for generations. Yes, he used force. Yes, he eliminated opposition. But he also unified thousands of worlds under a single government that provided security, infrastructure, and purpose to trillions of beings. At the cost of their freedom, Picard said quietly. Lord Vader, I understand the appeal of what you describe. A benevolent authority that makes hard decisions so individuals don't have to. A system so efficient that problems are solved before they escalate. It's seductive, especially in times of crisis. But it only works as long as the authority remains benevolent. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. We've seen it across 1,000 worlds and 1,000 species. No being, no matter how well-intentioned, can be trusted with unlimited authority for unlimited time. Vader's fist clenched slowly on his knee. Then what is your alternative, Captain? A system where every decision requires consensus? Where progress is measured in decades because achieving agreement among diverse populations is glacially slow? Where evil flourishes because good beings endlessly debate the proper response? I have seen what happens when the strong refuse to act because doing so violates democratic principles. I have watched worlds burn while committees deliberated. And I have seen what happens when the strong act without restraint, Picard countered with equal intensity. The Cardassian occupation of Bajorans, 50 years of brutality justified as bringing order to a chaotic culture. The Borg Collective, perfect efficiency achieved by eliminating individuality entirely. Your own empire, destroying Alderaan to make a point about obedience. These are the results of your philosophy taken to its logical conclusion, Lord Vader. Not order. Not peace. Just control maintained through terror. Alderaan was a mistake, Vader said, and something in his mechanical voice carried genuine emotion. A miscalculation by Grand Moff Tarkin, not Imperial policy. The Emperor was displeased. As was I. Destroying a populated world to demonstrate the Death Star's power was wasteful and ultimately counterproductive. It created martyrs and strengthened the rebellion rather than crushing it. So you agree that absolute power without checks can lead to catastrophic errors? I agree that incompetent leadership leads to catastrophic errors, Captain. The problem was not the authority itself, but the man wielding it. Tarkin was a bureaucrat who mistook cruelty for strength. A properly disciplined authority, one that understands when force serves the mission and when it undermines it, would not have made such a mistake. Picard leaned back, studying the Dark Lord with new understanding. You're describing yourself, aren't you? You believe you are that properly disciplined authority. That given absolute power, you would wield it responsibly because you've learned from past mistakes. That the 501st Legion, under your command, represents the ideal of ordered benevolence. The breathing filled the silence, and around the plaza, colonists held their breath. I am what the galaxy made me, Captain Picard. A weapon forged in fire, tempered by loss, sharpened by purpose. Yes, I believe I could wield authority more effectively than your democratic systems. Not because I am inherently superior, but because I understand what you refuse to acknowledge, that most beings do not want freedom. They want safety. Purpose. Someone to tell them what to do so they don't have to bear the weight of their own choices. The Federation offers them the burden of self-determination and calls it liberation. The Empire offered them the comfort of order and called it service. And which did you want, Lord Vader? The question came from Riker, unable to contain himself any longer. Safety or freedom? Because from where I'm standing, that armor you wear looks an awful lot like a prison. Every stormtrooper's weapon snapped to ready position, targeting Riker with lethal precision. But Vader raised a hand, and they lowered their rifles smoothly. Commander Riker speaks out of turn, but not out of ignorance. Vader's helmet turned toward Riker. You are correct, Commander. This armor is a prison. A life support system that keeps me alive when nature would have claimed me. I cannot remove it without dying. I cannot breathe without its respirator. I cannot feel the sun's warmth or the wind's touch. I am trapped inside my own body, sustained by technology, dependent on systems I cannot escape. He turned back to Picard. But that prison gave me purpose when I had nothing else. It made me stronger than I was. It allowed me to serve the Empire when I should have died on Mustafar, consumed by fire and rage. So yes, Captain, it is a prison. But it is also liberation from the weakness of flesh, from the limitations of an organic body that could be broken by any enemy with sufficient firepower. I traded one kind of freedom for another. And I do not regret it. Don't you? Picard's voice was soft, but it carried weight. Lord Vader, Counselor Troy sensed pain in you during our first encounter. Doubt during Five's trial. Conflict when you spoke of the Emperor and your service. These are not the emotions of someone at peace with their choices. They're the emotions of someone who has convinced themselves that what they lost was worth what they gained, but wonders, in the dark hours, if that's true. The temperature in the plaza dropped. Equipment nearby flickered. And everyone present felt invisible pressure building in the air as Vader's control wavered. You know nothing of what I have lost, Vader said, his voice deadly quiet. Nothing of what I have sacrificed. The Jedi Council promised me training, wisdom, purpose, and delivered dogma, suspicion, and restraint. They feared my power because it exceeded their understanding. They refused me the rank I earned because I did not conform to their ancient traditions. And when I needed their help most desperately, when the person I loved more than life itself was dying, they offered me platitudes about accepting loss and letting go. Picard felt the weight of genuine emotion beneath the mechanical voice. Who was she, Lord Vader? That is none of your concern, Captain. It is, though. Because understanding what you've lost helps me understand what you're trying to build here. You're not trying to recreate the Empire, you're trying to create something that justifies what you became to serve it. An order so perfect, so effective, that your sacrifices matter. That the person you were didn't die for nothing. The pressure released suddenly, and Vader stood, his cape billowing despite the still air. This conversation is over, Captain Picard. You have had your hour. We have debated philosophy while my forces completed their resource extraction. The dilithium reserves we require have been loaded aboard my shuttles. I will depart now, and your colony will be unharmed. Picard rose as well. And if I order you to return what you've taken? Then you will force a confrontation your starship cannot win. The Enterprise is a formidable vessel, Captain, but it is alone. I have 3 star destroyers in this system, and my forces are fortified. You may damage my fleet, but you will not stop me. And in the process, you will endanger this colony and your crew. Vader's helmet tilted slightly. You are too smart to choose that path, Captain. You will protest, file reports, strengthen your defenses. But you will not start a war over dilithium. You're right, Picard admitted. I won't sacrifice lives over resources. But Lord Vader, understand this, every world you seize, every resource you steal, every line you cross. It brings us closer to the day when war is unavoidable. When the Federation has exhausted every diplomatic option and must defend itself through force. And on that day, you will face not one starship, but hundreds. Not Captain Picard appealing to your better nature, but Admiral Nechayev implementing military strategy designed to eliminate you as a threat. I welcome that day, Captain. Because it will force your Federation to become what it needs to be. An organization willing to use strength to defend its principles, rather than hiding behind those principles to avoid necessary action. You will become more like the Empire, or you will be destroyed by those who already understand that power, not idealism, determines survival. Vader gestured, and his stormtroopers began moving toward their transport shuttles, carrying cases of dilithium with efficient precision. The AT-ST walkers powered down and were loaded onto heavy cargo lifters. Within minutes, the Imperial presence was withdrawing, leaving behind only boot prints in the plaza dust and the memory of occupation. But before Vader could beam back to his flagship, Picard called out one last time. Lord Vader. You said the person you loved was dying. Did the Emperor save her? Vader stopped, his back to Picard, cape settling around him like folded wings. No, Captain. She died. Despite everything I did, every promise I broke, every principle I abandoned to gain the power to save her, she died anyway. And I became this. He gestured to his armor, his mask, his mechanical body. So you tell me, Captain Picard, was freedom worth the cost? Would you choose to remain yourself, powerless to save those you love, clinging to principles while they die? Or would you become a monster if it meant the slightest chance to protect them? The question hung in the air like a blade. And then Lord Vader vanished in a shimmer of transporter energy, leaving Picard standing alone in the plaza with Riker beside him and a question he couldn't answer. Captain, Riker said quietly, what do we do now? Picard watched the Executor accelerate away from Corvin 2, its massive engines glowing with power as it departed the system. We report to Starfleet. We prepare for what's coming. And we pray, number 1, that we can find a third path, one where we neither become the Empire we oppose nor fall victim to our own principles. And if there is no third path, sir, Picard's expression hardened with determination and dread in equal measure. Then we make one, Commander. Because if Lord Vader is right, if the choice truly is between becoming monsters or becoming victims, then everything the Federation stands for is a lie. And I refuse to believe that. As the Enterprise prepared to leave orbit, sensors detected something that made Data's positronic brain recalculate every probability matrix. The spatial distortion near the Felton system, the null point where Vader had torn a planet from reality, was expanding. Slowly, incrementally, but measurably. The dimensional rift experiments were continuing. And whatever Lord Vader was building toward, the Federation was running out of time to stop him. Stardate 43897.2. Felton System, Null Point Perimeter. The USS Enterprise D held position 3 million kilometers from the spatial anomaly, sensors straining to analyze what should not exist. On the main view screen, the null point appeared as a sphere of absolute darkness, not the darkness of empty space dotted with stars, but true void where light itself ceased to function according to known physics. Captain, Data reported from Ops, his golden eyes reflecting the sensor readouts. The anomaly has expanded by another 12,000 kilometers in the past 72 hours. At this rate of growth, it will reach critical mass, approximately 1/10 the diameter of this system's star, within 6 weeks. At that point, gravitational effects will begin destabilizing planetary orbits throughout the sector. Picard stood at the center of the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, watching the impossible made manifest. And Lord Vader's activities? The Executor and its 2 sister ships are positioned in close orbit around the anomaly, Captain. Sensors detect massive energy discharges occurring at regular intervals, consistent with controlled dimensional manipulation attempts. Lord Vader appears to be using the existing null point as a template, attempting to stabilize and expand the rift deliberately. He's trying to tear open a doorway home, Riker said grimly. And he doesn't care if he destroys half the quadrant doing it. Counselor Troy's expression was troubled, her empathic senses reaching across the void toward the dark presence aboard the Executor. Captain, I'm sensing something from Lord Vader, desperation. Not the panic of failure, but the determination of someone who knows this is his only chance. Whatever he's attempting, he believes it's close to succeeding. Mr. Worf, status of the Starfleet Task Force. The Klingon security officer checked tactical displays. Admiral Nechayev's fleet will arrive in 47 minutes, Captain. 12 star ships, including the Enterprise C and the USS Valiant. The Admiral has transmitted her intention to demand Lord Vader cease all dimensional experiments and surrender his fleet for Federation custody. If he refuses, she is authorized to use lethal force. Authorized by whom? Picard's voice carried sharp concern. The Federation Council has not declared war. By Starfleet Command, sir. Admiral Brackett invoked Emergency Protocol 7. Immediate threat to Federation security requiring decisive military action. The legal justification is that Lord Vader's experiments pose existential danger to local spacetime, equivalent to deploying weapons of mass destruction. Therefore, preemptive neutralization is legally defensible. Picard's jaw tightened. Legally defensible does not make it right, Mr. Worf. Firing on the 501st before they've actually attacked Federation assets makes us the aggressors, regardless of the justification. We become exactly what Lord Vader accused us of being, hypocrites who abandon principles when they become inconvenient. With respect, Captain, Riker interjected, we're past principles here. Look at that thing. He gestured to the null point on the view screen. Vader's torn a hole in reality large enough to swallow a planet. If he succeeds in opening a stable dimensional bridge, what comes through? His entire empire. Their super-star destroyers, their Death Stars, their unlimited clone armies. We're talking about an interdimensional invasion that could end the Federation before we mount a defense. Or, Picard countered, we're talking about a desperate leader trying to return home to the only purpose he's ever known, and we're about to murder thousands of soldiers to prevent it. There's a difference, number one. Before Riker could respond, the comm system chirped with Admiral Nechayev's voice. Enterprise, this is Admiral Nechayev aboard the Valiant. Captain Picard, I need your tactical assessment. Can we disable the Star Destroyers without destroying them? Picard moved to his ready room, gesturing for Riker to take the bridge. Once the door sealed behind him, he activated the secure channel. Admiral, I have significant reservations about this operation. Nechayev's image appeared on his desktop monitor, her expression carved from ice and duty. Your reservations are noted, Captain. But this isn't a debate. Lord Vader's experiments have already destroyed one planet and are destabilizing subspace across 3 sectors. Every hour we delay increases the risk of catastrophic failure, a dimensional cascade that could tear holes in spacetime throughout the quadrant. We cannot allow that to happen. Agreed, Admiral. But perhaps we can convince Lord Vader to stop voluntarily. If we approach him not as enemies but as allies offering an alternative. We've tried diplomacy, Jean-Luc. You personally have tried multiple times. Vader is not interested in alternatives. He wants to go home, and he'll sacrifice this entire universe if necessary to do it. That makes him an existential threat we cannot negotiate with. Admiral, I spoke with him on Corvin II. Beneath the armor and the doctrine, there's a person who has lost everything, his home, his purpose, possibly the woman he loved. He's trying to reclaim what was taken from him. That's not evil, that's tragedy. Tragedy doesn't excuse endangering billions of lives, Captain. Nechayev's voice softened fractionally. I understand your position. You see the person beneath the monster and want to believe he can be redeemed. But my responsibility is to the Federation's survival, not Lord Vader's soul. The task force will arrive in 41 minutes. You will take tactical position Alpha 3 and prepare to engage the Star Destroyers on my command. Is that clear? Picard's hand tightened on the edge of his desk. Crystal clear, Admiral. Enterprise out. He sat there for a long moment, staring at the monitor, wrestling with the impossible choice. Duty demanded he follow orders. Conscience demanded he find another way. And time was running out for both. A door chime interrupted his contemplation. Come. Data entered, carrying a PADD and wearing that expression of focused curiosity that indicated significant discovery. Captain, I have been analyzing the null point's energy signature and comparing it to known dimensional phenomena in Federation databases. I believe I have determined what Lord Vader is attempting, and why it is both more dangerous and more achievable than we estimated. Explain. The null point is not simply a tear in spacetime, Captain. It is a resonance chamber. Lord Vader is using the Force, his telekinetic and metaphysical abilities, to create standing waves in the dimensional boundary. He is, essentially, playing the fabric of reality like a musical instrument, searching for the correct frequency that will open a stable portal to his home universe. Picard leaned forward. And has he found it? Not yet, sir. But his attempts are becoming increasingly refined. I estimate he will achieve resonance lock within 72 to 96 hours. Once locked, he can expand the portal to sufficient size for his fleet to transit. However, Data paused, his expression growing troubled. Captain, my analysis indicates that opening a stable portal of that magnitude will require energy equivalent to 3 simultaneous warp core breaches. The only way to generate such power is to overload the Star Destroyer's reactors deliberately. The implication struck Picard like a physical blow. He's going to destroy his own fleet. More precisely, sir, he intends to use his ships as sacrificial energy sources. The 501st Legion will return home, but the Star Destroyers, and anyone still aboard them, will be consumed in the dimensional breach. I calculate 0% survival probability for anyone within the portal's event horizon during activation. Data, would Lord Vader sacrifice thousands of his own soldiers just to get home? The android tilted his head thoughtfully. Captain, reviewing Lord Vader's psychological profile suggests he would rationalize such sacrifice as necessary for the mission. He has already demonstrated willingness to endure personal suffering in service to the Empire. Extending that principle to his troops would be consistent with his command philosophy: the individual exists to serve the collective good, even unto death. Picard stood, moving to his ready room viewport where the null point dominated the view like a wound in space itself. Then we're not just facing a military threat, Data. We're facing mass suicide. Thousands of clone troopers who will die believing they're serving a greater purpose, never knowing their commander sees them as expendable fuel for his dimensional engine. Correction, Captain. Some may know. CT 5555-5s demonstrated that clone conditioning can be overcome. There may be others aboard those ships who question their orders, who recognize the futility of this sacrifice. But they are bound by military discipline and fear of execution to remain silent. A terrible idea began forming in Picard's mind. Dangerous. Probably futile. Definitely against Admiral Nechayev's direct orders. But possibly the only way to prevent both mass death and Federation complicity in it. Data, can we communicate with the Star Destroyers directly? Not through official channels, but unofficially. A tight beam transmission to specific areas of the ship? Affirmative, Captain. Imperial communication protocols are sophisticated but not immune to targeted infiltration. If we knew the frequency and encryption keys used for internal comms, Data's eyes widened fractionally. Captain, are you suggesting we contact CT 5555 and other potential defectors? Attempt to foment mutiny aboard Lord Vader's flagship? I'm suggesting we give the 501st soldiers the information they need to make an informed choice about their fate. If they know what Vader's planning, that he intends to sacrifice them, perhaps they'll choose differently. Perhaps enough of them will refuse that the operation becomes impossible. Captain Picard, Data said carefully, such action would constitute interference in another military force's internal operations. It could be considered an act of war. And if Admiral Nechayev discovers our involvement, you could face court-martial for insubordination and sabotage. Picard met his android officer's gaze with absolute conviction. Mr. Data, I took an oath to protect life and uphold the principles of the Federation. If that means violating the chain of command to prevent mass suicide and interdimensional catastrophe, then so be it. The Federation can court-martial me later, assuming we all survive. Right now, I need to know, can you establish communication with Fives without alerting Lord Vader? Data's fingers moved across his PADD, calculations flowing through his positronic net. Yes, Captain. But we have a significant problem. Our last intelligence report indicated Fives is confined to engineering sections under constant surveillance. Even if we reach him, he may be unable to act without immediate detection and execution. Then we'll need to create a distraction. Something that draws Vader's attention away long enough for Fives to spread the word among his brothers. Picard's mind raced through tactical options. Data, if we launched a full sensor sweep of the null point, aggressive, invasive, the kind that would trigger Imperial security protocols, would that force Vader to respond? Almost certainly, Captain. Such action would be interpreted as reconnaissance preceding an attack. Lord Vader would need to address it personally, both to determine our intentions and to prevent us from gathering data about his dimensional research. Then that's what we'll do. Prepare a communication package for Fives, everything we know about Vader's plan, the probability of fleet destruction, and an offer of Federation asylum for any defectors. Encrypt it with the highest security protocols we have. When I give the signal, you'll transmit while I keep Vader occupied. Captain, Data said quietly, even if this succeeds, even if Fives convinces other clones to mutiny, Lord Vader is extraordinarily powerful. He has demonstrated the ability to kill through telekinesis alone. A conventional mutiny may simply result in mass executions before achieving its objective. I know, Data. But we have to try. Because the alternative is watching Admiral Nechayev's fleet destroy 3-star destroyers full of soldiers who are victims as much as threats. And I will not be party to that kind of slaughter if there's any other option. Data nodded once, crisply. Then I will prepare the transmission, Captain. Though I feel compelled to note that your actions are both tactically questionable and morally admirable, a combination I find uniquely human. I'll take that as a compliment, Mr. Data. Now let's see if we can save some lives before the shooting starts. CT 5555, Fives. Tightened another coupling on the hyperdrive motivator assembly, his hands moving with the mechanical precision of someone who performed the same task thousands of times. Around him, other clones worked in silence, maintaining systems that would never function as designed, adapting Imperial technology to a universe that rejected it. He'd been confined to engineering for 6 weeks since the court-martial. No armor. No weapons. No contact with his brothers beyond work assignments. Commander Cody checked on him weekly, ensuring he remained compliant, but otherwise, Fives existed in isolation, a ghost haunting the ship he'd once served with pride. But isolation had given him time to think. Time to observe. Time to notice things that battle-focused troopers missed. Like the increasing frequency of Lord Vader's visits to the dimensional research labs. The way engineering crews were being quietly trained on emergency reactor overload protocols. Procedures you'd only need if you plan to deliberately destroy your own ship. The way officers spoke in hushed tones about the final transit and necessary sacrifices. Fives wasn't stupid. He'd been bred for warfare, conditioned for loyalty, but he could still think. Still calculate. Still recognize when something didn't add up. And what he was seeing added up to a suicide mission. A proximity alert on his work console drew his attention. Someone was accessing his station remotely, bypassing security protocols with sophisticated precision. Not Imperial access. Something else. Text appeared on his screen, encrypted but readable. CT 5555, this is Captain Picard of the USS Enterprise. Don't react visibly. Don't alert anyone. Just read. Lord Vader is planning to sacrifice the entire 501st Fleet to open his dimensional portal. Your ships will be deliberately destroyed in the process. Reactor overload protocols. Every clone aboard will die. This is not honorable service. This is mass suicide. You were right to question. You were right to run. And you can still save your brothers. We're transmitting full tactical data to your station. Show them the truth. Let them choose. Federation Asylum is available for any who want it. But if you do nothing, you all die in 72 hours. Choose quickly. Picard. Fives' hands didn't shake. Couldn't shake. Clone conditioning prevented that kind of physical betrayal. But his mind reeled, calculations spinning through scenarios, probabilities, outcomes. If he did nothing, they all died. Lord Vader returned home alone, or died trying, and the 501st became a footnote in history, sacrificed for one man's obsession. If he acted and failed, Vader would execute him and anyone else involved. The suicide mission would continue, just with fewer voices to question it. But if he acted and succeeded. Fives' fingers moved across his console, downloading the data Picard had sent, copying it to portable storage drives. Around him, other engineers worked, oblivious to the choice being made in their midst. He had 72 hours to save his brothers or watch them die. The question was whether clone troopers bred for absolute loyalty could overcome their conditioning when faced with absolute betrayal. Fives looked at the nearest clone engineer, CT 6841, Hammer, a soldier who'd served since the first battle of Geonosis. A brother who deserved to know the truth. Hammer, Fives said quietly, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do. I need you to see something. And then I need you to help me spread the word to every clone on this ship. What kind of something, Fives? The kind that makes you choose between following orders and staying alive. And in that moment, aboard the Executor, the seeds of mutiny began to take root. ISD Executor, Main Engineering, 0400 hours ship time. The night shift aboard a Star Destroyer was never truly quiet. Reactors hummed with barely contained power, life support systems cycled atmosphere through kilometers of corridors, and automated systems ran their endless diagnostics. But at 0400 hours, with minimal crew on duty, the ship felt almost peaceful. Almost. Five stood at the central engineering console, surrounded by 16 clone troopers he'd carefully selected over the past 18 hours. Men he'd served with for years. Brothers who'd questioned orders before, even if only in private moments. Men like Hammer, like Echo, like Jesse, survivors who'd seen too much to accept simple answers anymore. On the console's main display, Picard's data scrolled in damning detail. Reactor overload sequences. Energy requirement calculations. Dimensional breach projections. And the final, terrible truth, 0% survival probability for anyone aboard when the portal opened. This is Federation propaganda, Jesse said, but his voice lacked conviction. Lord Vader wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Echo interrupted, his voice harsh from a throat scarred by battle damage. Wouldn't sacrifice us. Brother, we were bred to be sacrificed. That's the whole point of clones. We're replaceable. Expandable. Tools. But Lord Vader said. During Five's trial, he said we had value beyond conditioning. That we could choose purpose. He said we could choose to serve his purpose, Fives corrected quietly. That's not the same as choosing our own. Look at the data, Jesse. Really look at it. The reactor protocols we've been training on for weeks, they're not maintenance procedures. They're controlled destruction sequences. We're being taught to destroy our own ships. Hammer, the oldest clone present, studied the display with the tactical mind of a career soldier. Assuming this data is accurate, and that's a big assumption, Fives, what's your plan? We can't exactly mutiny. There are 20,000 troops on this ship, and most of them would execute us for treason before we finished explaining. Not if we show them the truth first. Fives pulled up a schematic of the Executor's internal communication system. Every clone aboard has access to the tactical network. If we broadcast this data shipwide simultaneously, every brother sees it at once. No time for Vader to spin it or suppress it. Just raw truth, delivered to every terminal, every datapad, every helmet HUD across the fleet. That's still not a plan, that's a broadcast, Echo pointed out. What happens after they see it? Even if they believe it, and that's not guaranteed, we're talking about overthrowing Lord Vader himself. Have you forgotten what he can do? He choked Captain Picard from across a view screen. He crushed that asteroid field with his mind. He's killed Jedi Knights who spent decades training to fight him. What chance do clones have? More than you think, a new voice said from the shadows. Every trooper spun, hands reaching for weapons that weren't there. Engineering duty didn't include sidearms. From the darkness between reactor pylons, a figure emerged wearing civilian clothes and a medical bracelet, but his face was unmistakable. Another clone, but older, his features showing signs of accelerated aging that all Jango Fett clones eventually faced. Rex, Fives breathed. I thought you were in medical quarantine. Accelerated aging progression. Was a convenient excuse to move freely through the ship while everyone assumed I was dying, Captain Rex, legendary commander of the 501st during the Clone Wars, said with a grim smile. Fives, I've been watching you since the trial. Waiting to see if you'd find your courage again. Looks like you did. You knew about this? Hammer gestured to the data display. About Vader's plan? Suspected. Couldn't prove it until Fives handed me the evidence. Rex moved to the console, his experienced eyes scanning the technical specifications. Lord Vader is a brilliant tactician and a powerful warrior. But he's also a fanatic who believes the mission justifies any sacrifice. During the Clone Wars, I watched him send battalions to their deaths when strategic objectives required it. Mourned them, yes. Regretted their loss, absolutely. But never questioned whether their deaths served the greater good. This is different, Jesse protested. This isn't sacrificing some troops to save others. This is killing everyone. To save the Empire, Rex countered. To return home and resume serving the Emperor. In Vader's calculation, sacrificing one fleet to restore his connection to galactic civilization is absolutely justified. We're variables in his equation, brothers. Not people. The assembled clones exchanged glances, decades of conditioning warring with growing horror. So what do we do? Echo asked. Assuming we accept this is real, that we're all marked for death, how do we stop it? We can't kill Vader. We probably can't even reach him. He's surrounded by royal guards, stormtrooper units loyal to him personally, and his own force abilities. A frontal assault is suicide. Then we don't assault, Five said, his strategic mind clicking through alternatives. We evacuate. The Federation is offering asylum. Captain Picard transmitted coordinates for emergency beacons we can activate. We broadcast the truth to every clone aboard, give them the choice Vader denied us, and everyone who wants to live gets off these ships before he triggers the reactors. Desertion, Hammer said flatly. Mass desertion. You're talking about the entire 501st Legion abandoning their posts and fleeing to the Federation. I'm talking about 20,000 soldiers choosing life over meaningless death, Five shot back. Hammer, we were bred for war. Conditioned to follow orders. Told our purpose was to serve the Republic, then the Empire, then Lord Vader himself. But look where that got us, stranded in an alien universe, cut off from everything we knew, being used as fuel for one man's obsession with returning to a master who isn't even here. His voice rose with passion, breaking through the careful control clone conditioning demanded. When does it end, brother? When do we stop being tools and start being people? When do our lives matter as much as the mission? Rex placed a hand on Five's shoulder, the gesture carrying weight of shared experience and hard-won wisdom. Easy, Fives. Save the speech for the broadcast. Right now, we need tactics. He turned to address the assembled clones. Here's the situation, Lord Vader will discover this mutiny the moment we go shipwide with the data. We'll have maybe 10 minutes before he responds. Either by executing ringleaders to terrify everyone else into compliance, or by accelerating his timeline and triggering the reactors immediately. So we need simultaneous action across 3 ships, coordinated perfectly, with escape routes planned for anyone who chooses to take them. The Federation fleet is out there, Echo noted, checking tactical displays. Enterprise, Valiant, and 10 other starships. If we signal them, if we coordinate with Captain Picard. We risk him being the one who triggers the shooting war, Rex interrupted. The moment Starfleet thinks we're in open mutiny against Vader, they'll attack to support us. Vader will interpret that as Federation treachery and respond with everything he's got. We'll be caught between 2 fleets tearing each other apart. So we need to move fast, Fives concluded. Broadcast the data. Give brothers maybe 5 minutes to process and decide. Signal the Federation that we're evacuating. And get as many clones to escape pods, shuttles, and TIE fighters as possible before Vader locks down the fleet. Jesse shook his head in disbelief. You're talking about evacuating 20,000 troops from 3-star destroyers in under 15 minutes. That's impossible. No, Rex said with the certainty of someone who'd survived impossible odds before. It's improbable. But we're the 501st. We've done improbable our entire existence. This is just one more impossible mission. Except this time, we're saving ourselves instead of serving someone else. The clones looked at each other, decades of brotherhood communicating in glances what words couldn't express. They were bred to be soldiers. Conditioned to follow orders. Created to serve and die without question. But they were also men. Individuals who had learned, through pain and loss and experience, that blind obedience wasn't loyalty, it was slavery. "I'm in," Hammer said finally. "If we're going to die, let it be choosing our own way." "Agreed," Echo added. "For our brothers," Jesse said quietly. One by one, the assembled clones voiced their commitment. And Fives felt something he hadn't experienced since arriving in this universe: hope. "Rex," Fives said, "you're the ranking officer here. This is your call." The old captain, veteran of countless campaigns, survivor of betrayals and wars and the slow death of everything he'd fought for, straightened his shoulders and met Fives' eyes with absolute resolve. "CT 5555, CT 1409, CT 5597, and all brothers present, here are your orders. Prepare the broadcast package for simultaneous transmission across all Imperial vessels. Coordinate with engineering teams on the Devastator and Relentless to ensure they receive the data simultaneously. Establish communication with Captain Picard's Enterprise and transmit evacuation coordinates." And, he paused, the weight of what he was about to say visible in his aging features. "And may the Force be with us. Because we're going to need every advantage we can get." "Captain," Data reported with barely contained urgency, "I am detecting unusual communication traffic within the Imperial fleet. Tight beam transmissions between all 3 Star Destroyers, using encryption protocols that suggest internal coordination rather than external communication." Picard leaned forward in his command chair. "Fives received our transmission." "Possibly, Captain. But I cannot confirm." The tactical display erupted with alerts as every Imperial vessel simultaneously broadcast on open channels. Not to the Federation fleet. Not to external recipients. To themselves. "Captain," Worf said, surprise evident in his voice, "the 501st Legion is broadcasting to its own troops. All frequencies, all ships, unrestricted access. They're transmitting technical specifications. Reactor protocols. And a recorded message. On screen, Mr. Worf." The view screen shifted to show a clone trooper. Older, bearing the distinctive blue markings of the 501st Senior Command, standing in what appeared to be an engineering section. Behind him, other clones stood at attention, their body language radiating determination. "Brothers of the 501st Legion," the clone began, his voice rough but clear. "I am Captain Rex, CT 7567. I served under General Skywalker during the Clone Wars. I fought on 100 worlds. Lost thousands of brothers. Followed orders even when those orders led to death. But I will not follow this one." Rex gestured to a display showing the same data Picard had transmitted to Fives. "Lord Vader is planning to sacrifice this entire fleet, every clone, every officer, every being aboard these ships, to open a dimensional portal home. We're not soldiers in this plan. We're fuel. Expendable energy sources to power his obsession." The bridge of the Enterprise fell silent as they watched mutiny unfold in real time. "I'm not telling you to abandon the Empire," Rex continued. "I'm not even telling you to abandon Lord Vader. I'm telling you the truth, and I'm giving you a choice the Empire never gave us. You can stay, follow orders, and die in 72 hours when these reactors overload. Or you can leave. The Federation is offering asylum. Escape pods. Shuttles. A chance to live beyond this mission." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a man who'd lost too much to lose anything more. "We were bred to serve. Conditioned to obey. But we're also men. Brothers. Individuals who deserve to choose our own fate. I'm choosing to live. I'm choosing to save as many of you as I can. What you choose is up to you. But choose quickly. Because once Lord Vader realizes what's happening, this window closes. Rex out. The transmission ended, and for approximately 7 seconds, nothing happened. Then the sensors went insane. Captain. Worf's voice carried shock. Multiple launches from all 3 Star Destroyers. Escape pods, TIE fighters, shuttles, cargo transports, they're abandoning ship. Hundreds of craft, launching simultaneously. How many, Mr. Worf? The Klingon officer's hands moved across his console, tracking the exodus with disbelief. Initial count estimates. Approximately 40% of the Imperial fleet's complement. 8,000 soldiers. They're evacuating. Counselor, Picard said quietly, what do you sense from the executor? Troy's eyes were closed, her empathic abilities stretched to their limit. Chaos, Captain. Fear, confusion, hope, determination, it's overwhelming. But beneath it all, her eyes snapped open. Rage. Absolute rage. Lord Vader knows. And he's about to respond. On the view screen, the lead Star Destroyer. The Executor began rotating its weapons arrays. But not toward the Federation fleet. Toward its own escape pods. My God, Riker breathed. He's going to shoot his own people. Picard was on his feet instantly. Open a channel to Admiral Nechayev. All Federation ships, move to intercept those escape pods. Put yourselves between the Imperial fleet and their evacuees. And hail Lord Vader immediately. Captain, Worf protested, if we position ourselves between the Star Destroyers and their escape pods, we become targets. We'll be in their direct line of fire. Exactly, Mr. Worf. Lord Vader won't fire on Federation vessels unless he's willing to start a war with an enemy he can't defeat. We're betting he values his mission more than punishing deserters. Hail him. Now. The view screen shifted to show Lord Vader standing on the Executor's bridge, his black armor stark against the viewports showing hundreds of small craft fleeing his fleet like birds escaping a burning tree. Behind him, Imperial officers worked frantically at their stations, trying to coordinate a response to mass mutiny. And Vader. Vader stood perfectly still, breathing. Captain Picard, he said, his mechanical voice absolutely devoid of emotion. You did this. You contacted my troops. You spread sedition. You destroyed the 501st Legion. I gave them the truth, Lord Vader. I gave them a choice. What you choose to do with that truth is up to you. I choose vengeance, Captain. I choose to demonstrate what happens when order is violated. I choose to show the Federation that interfering in Imperial affairs carries consequences. Vader's hand rose, fingers extending, and across the void of space, Picard felt invisible pressure beginning to build. Not around his throat this time. Around the Enterprise itself. Structural beams groaned. Hull plates buckled. And Counselor Troi screamed as she felt the Dark Lords were trying to crush the starship like an aluminum can. All power to shields. Riker shouted. Evasive maneuvers. But the Enterprise wasn't moving. Held in place by telekinetic force beyond any scientific explanation, suspended in Vader's rage like an insect in amber. Lord Vader, Picard managed through the pressure, if you destroy this ship, you declare war on the Federation. Your 3 Star Destroyers against our entire fleet. You cannot win that war. Perhaps not, Captain. But I can make you pay dearly for your betrayal. The pressure increased. Warning klaxons screamed. Structural integrity fields strained to their limits. And aboard the Enterprise, 1,500 crew members held their breath, waiting to see if their shields would fail before Vader's concentration did. Then, from across the tactical display, a new voice transmitted on all frequencies. Lord Vader, this is Captain Rex. Stand down. We're not your enemy. We're your brothers. And we're not worth dying for. The pressure released. The Enterprise lurched free, shields flickering but holding. And on the view screen, Vader turned slowly toward the camera, his faceless mask somehow conveying absolute betrayal. Rex. You were loyal. You were faithful. I trusted you. And I trusted you, Lord Vader. Trusted you to value our lives as more than fuel for your obsession. I was wrong. We all were. You are a traitor, Captain. You and every clone who follows you. When I return to the Empire, I will inform the Emperor of your betrayal. Your names will be stricken from every honor roll. Your service forgotten. You will be nothing. Rex's voice carried sadness but also finality. We're already nothing to the Empire, Lord Vader. We've always been nothing. Just numbers. Just tools. But to each other? To our brothers? We're everything. And I won't let you make us sacrifice each other for a master who doesn't care if we live or die. Then you die first, Captain. But before Vader could act, before his force abilities could reach across space to kill the mutiny's ringleader, something extraordinary happened. Every clone on every escape pod, shuttle, and TIE fighter transmitted simultaneously. Not words. Just a simple acknowledgement signal, the kind brothers used to confirm they'd heard and understood orders. Thousands of voices, unified in defiance, telling their Dark Lord that they stood with Rex. That if he wanted to kill the mutineers, he'd have to kill them all. And in that moment, Lord Vader faced a choice of his own. Kill 8,000 troops and prove everything Rex said about him. Or let them go and admit that control maintained through fear had finally shattered beyond repair. The breathing filled the silence, mechanical and eternal. Then Vader's hand lowered. His fist clenched. And when he spoke, his voice carried something that might have been grief, might have been rage, might have been both. Go, then. Run to the Federation. Hide behind their principles and their promises. But know this, Captain Rex, CT 5555, and all who follow you, you are no longer brothers of the 501st Legion. You are deserters. Traitors. And should we ever meet again, I will show you no mercy. We never asked for mercy, Lord Vader, Rex replied quietly. Just a choice. Thank you for finally giving us one. The transmission ended. The escape pods and shuttles adjusted course, heading toward the Federation fleet that was already moving to intercept and recover them. And aboard the Executor, Devastator, and Relentless, the remaining 12,000 troops stood at their posts, having chosen loyalty over survival. Picard watched this unfold with a mixture of relief and sorrow. They'd saved 8,000 lives. But 12,000 remained, still committed to their Dark Lord's doomed mission. Admiral Nechayev to Enterprise. Captain Picard, what the hell just happened? We gave them a choice, Admiral. And they chose. Some of them chose, Nechayev corrected. What about the others? What about Vader and his remaining forces? Picard looked at the 3-star destroyers on his view screen, diminished now, operating at less than half capacity, but still formidable. Still dangerous. Still committed to opening a dimensional portal that could destroy half the quadrant. That, Admiral, is the question we still need to answer. And somewhere aboard the Executor, standing alone on a bridge that now felt emptier than deep space, Lord Vader stared at the departing shuttles carrying away the soldiers he'd led, commanded, and ultimately failed. Commander Praji, he said quietly. Yes, my lord. How many remain loyal? Approximately 12,000 troops across all 3 vessels, Lord Vader. Primarily stormtroopers and officers rather than clone troopers. Enough to crew the ships. Enough to complete the mission. Then we proceed. The traitors have made their choice. We will make ours. Accelerate the timetable. We open the portal in 48 hours. My lord, with reduced crew, we cannot safely control a dimensional breach of that magnitude. The probability of catastrophic failure is irrelevant, Commander. We go home or we die trying. Prepare the fleet. And Commander? My lord? Remind the remaining troops why they serve. Remind them that loyalty, no matter how costly, is its own reward. Remind them that we are the 501st. And the 501st never surrenders. Stardate 43899.4. 48 hours later. Felton System. The Federation task force held position 3 million kilometers from the null point, sensors locked on the 3-star destroyers as they executed the final phase of Lord Vader's desperate gambit. Aboard the Enterprise, Captain Picard stood on the bridge watching history unfold. Whether it would be history of salvation or catastrophe remained to be seen. The Executor, Devastator, and Relentless had positioned themselves in perfect triangular formation around the null point's event horizon. Their reactors were redlining, pushing past safe operational limits, converting matter and antimatter into raw energy that poured into the dimensional anomaly like water filling an infinite well. Captain, Data reported, his voice carrying the precision of someone cataloging an apocalypse, the null point has achieved resonance lock. Lord Vader's calculations were correct, the dimensional barrier is thinning. I am detecting quantum fluctuations consistent with a forming bridge between our universe and elsewhere. Can we stop it? Admiral Nechayev's voice transmitted from the Valiant, where the task force command was coordinating. Negative, Admiral, Data replied. Disrupting the resonance field now would cause cascading dimensional collapse. The resulting explosion would sterilize this entire sector. Our only option is to allow the process to complete and hope the portal stabilizes rather than ruptures. Hope, Nechayev said bitterly. We're betting the quadrant on hope. On the view screen, the null point was changing. The absolute darkness at its center began to shimmer with colors that shouldn't exist. Shades the human eye couldn't quite process, wavelengths that violated known physics. And through those impossible colors, something was becoming visible. Stars. But not stars from this galaxy. A different sky, seen through a wound in reality. He did it, Riker breathed. Vader actually opened a portal to his home universe. Counselor Troy's empathic senses reached across the void toward the Executor, and what she felt made her gasp. Captain, Lord Vader, he's in agony. The energy required to maintain this portal, he's channeling it through himself. Using the Force as a living conduit between the reactors and the dimensional breach. The pain must be unimaginable. Picard's hands tightened on his command chair's armrests. How long can he sustain it? Unknown, Captain. But I sense resolution. Acceptance. He knows this might kill him, and he doesn't care. He's going home or dying in the attempt. The portal expanded, growing from a pinpoint to a sphere 10 kilometers across, then 20, then 50. Through its event horizon, the Federation sensors could see the impossible, another galaxy, another universe, the distinctive wedge-shaped forms of Imperial star destroyers and the organized chaos of galactic civilization on a scale the Federation had never achieved. Captain, Data said urgently, I am detecting movement through the portal. Something is coming through from the other side. The viewscreen's magnification increased, showing a vessel emerging from the dimensional bridge. Not a star destroyer. Something smaller, sleeker, an Imperial shuttle, its solar panel wings folded for transit, moving with purpose toward the 3 ships waiting on this side of reality. Hail them, Picard ordered. The shuttle's transmission carried a voice that was crisp, professional, and unmistakably Imperial. Federation vessels, this is Commander Sienna Rhee of the Imperial Security Bureau. I have been authorized by the Galactic Empire to make contact with Lord Vader and assess his situation. I am requesting permission to dock with the Executor. Nechayev's voice cut through. Captain Picard, we cannot allow Imperial reinforcements through that portal. If they establish a beachhead. Admiral, it's one shuttle. Not an invasion force. I recommend we observe before acting. The shuttle adjusted course, approaching the Executor with practiced precision. And aboard the massive Star Destroyer, Lord Vader stood on the bridge, watching the impossible made real. His empire had answered. ISD Executor, Conference Room. Commander Sienna Ree stood at attention before Lord Vader, her Imperial uniform immaculate, her expression professionally neutral despite the shock of seeing the Dark Lord's condition. Vader's armor showed signs of strain, scorch marks from energy feedback, frost from dimensional transit exposure, and the faint flicker of failing systems struggling to maintain life support. Lord Vader, Ree began carefully, the Emperor has been informed of your displacement. He has reviewed your reports transmitted through the dimensional bridge and has issued direct orders regarding your situation. What are my orders, Commander? Vader's voice was weaker than usual, the mechanical respirator struggling to maintain rhythm. You are to return immediately, my lord. The Empire has maintained a beacon on this side of the portal to guide your fleet home. However, she paused, consulting a datapad. The Emperor has determined that sustaining this portal is strategically inadvisable. The energy requirements are catastrophic, and there are concerns about dimensional instability threatening both universes. Once you and your remaining forces transit, the portal will be collapsed permanently. Understood. How long do we have? 4 hours, Lord Vader. The dimensional bridge is already degrading. Any longer, and the return journey becomes impossible. Vader turned to the viewport where the portal hung like a wound in space, showing the galaxy he'd been torn from 3 months prior. Home. Purpose. The Emperor's will. Everything he'd sacrificed thousands of lives to reach. Commander Praji, Vader said, initiate transit protocols. All personnel to their stations. We're going home. But before Praji could execute the order, an unexpected transmission came through. Not from the Federation fleet. From a single shuttle approaching the Executor. A Federation Type 6 carrying Captain Picard. Lord Vader, this is Captain Picard requesting permission to come aboard. I have a proposal before you depart. Vader's helmet turned toward the comm station. You have nothing I want, Captain. My mission is complete. I'm returning to the Empire. I have 8,000 of your brothers, Lord Vader. The clones who evacuated. They're in Federation custody, granted asylum as refugees. But before you leave, I thought you might want to know their fate. And perhaps, say goodbye. The bridge fell silent. Every Imperial officer present waited to see how their Dark Lord would respond. You manipulated them into betraying me, Captain. You destroyed the unity of the 501st Legion. Why would I concern myself with traitors' fates? Because despite everything, Lord Vader, I believe you still care about them. Not as tools. Not as expendable soldiers. As brothers. As men who served you faithfully until you asked them to die for nothing. The breathing filled the silence, and Vader's fist clenched slowly. Permission granted, Captain Picard. But make it quick. We transit in 3 hours, 47 minutes. With or without your proposal. 15 minutes later. Captain Picard materialized aboard the Executor, accompanied by Data and, surprisingly, Captain Rex. The old clone stood tall despite his accelerated aging, his presence a silent challenge to Vader's authority. They met in the same conference room where Five's trial had been held, where Vader had first demonstrated the capacity for mercy. Now, with the portal open and time running out, it would serve as the stage for their final confrontation. Captain Picard, Vader said, his tone glacial. You brought the architect of my fleet's destruction. Bold. I brought the man who saved 8,000 lives, Lord Vader, Picard corrected. Rex, would you like to speak? The old clone stepped forward, meeting Vader's eyeless gaze without flinching. Lord Vader, I served under you during the Clone Wars. Followed you into battle on dozens of worlds. Watched you lead from the front, risk yourself to save soldiers, mourn brothers who fell. That Anakin Skywalker, General Skywalker, valued clone lives. He saw us as men, not numbers. General Skywalker is dead, Vader said flatly. I killed him long ago. Did you? Because when you spared Fives, when you offered him a chance to prove himself beyond his conditioning, that wasn't the action of a monster. That was the action of someone who remembered what it meant to believe in redemption. Sentimentality, Captain Rex. A momentary weakness I will not repeat. Then answer me this, Lord Vader, are you glad we're alive? The 8,000 who evacuated, are you relieved that we survived, or angry that we defied you? The question hung in the air like a suspended blade. Vader's breathing continued, mechanical and eternal, before he finally spoke. I am conflicted, Captain Rex. You were my brothers. My soldiers. The finest warriors I ever commanded. Your betrayal was a wound deeper than any lightsaber strike. But your survival, he paused. Your survival proves that the Federation's philosophy has some merit. That beings, even clones, will choose life over duty when presented with the choice. That conditioning can be overcome. That free will, however chaotic, cannot be completely suppressed. So you understand why we left, Rex said quietly. I understand why you made that choice, Captain. I do not agree with it. But I understand. Vader turned to Picard. What is your proposal, Captain? You did not come here for philosophical debate. Picard stepped forward. Lord Vader, in 3 hours, you'll return to your empire. The portal will close, and our two universes will be separated forever. But before that happens, I'm offering you a choice similar to the one you gave Fives. Explain. Stay. Remain here, in this universe, and help us build something better than either the Federation or the Empire alone could create. You possess knowledge, experience, and abilities that could benefit billions. Yes, your methods are brutal. Yes, your philosophy conflicts with ours. But you've demonstrated the capacity for adaptation, for mercy when warranted, for recognizing that absolute order isn't the only path forward. Data added, Lord Vader, our analysis suggests that your unique abilities and strategic expertise could be invaluable in facing threats like the Borg Collective. Your force powers operate on principles they cannot easily assimilate. You represent an asymmetric advantage against an enemy that has defeated conventional Federation tactics repeatedly. You want me to abandon the Empire and join the Federation? Vader's voice carried something between disbelief and dark amusement. After everything I've done. After I nearly destroyed your starship, occupied your colony, destabilized your region of space. I'm offering you the chance to choose a different path, Picard said simply. To be more than the Emperor's enforcer. To define your own purpose rather than serving someone else's vision. Isn't that what you accuse the Federation of offering? Self-determination. Freedom to choose. For a long moment, Vader stood there, and everyone in the room felt the weight of the decision being made. Then he turned to the viewport, where the portal showed his home galaxy waiting, the Empire's beacon guiding him back to familiar purpose. Captain Picard, you offer me freedom. But freedom without purpose is just another form of chaos. The Emperor gave me meaning when I had nothing left but pain and rage. The Empire gave me a galaxy to defend, a mission to execute, a reason to continue existing when every breath is agony. What you offer is potential. What the Empire offers is certainty. Certainty can be a cage, Lord Vader. So can freedom, Captain. The freedom to choose wrong. The freedom to fail. The freedom to lose everything again because I wasn't strong enough, wasn't decisive enough, wasn't willing to do what was necessary. He turned back to face them. I have made my choice. I am going home. The 501st, what remains of it, returns to the Empire. Rex stepped forward one last time. And the brothers who stayed with the Federation? What message do you want me to give them? Vader was silent for a long moment before answering. Tell them. Tell them they made their choice, and I made mine. Tell them that while I cannot forgive their desertion, I do not condemn their desire to live. Tell them to find purpose in this universe since they refused purpose in ours. And tell them, his voice dropped to barely a whisper. Tell them that Anakin Skywalker would have been proud of their courage, even if Lord Vader cannot be. It was the closest thing to a blessing the Dark Lord could offer. 2 hours later. The 3-star destroyers moved toward the portal in formation, their remaining crews at battle stations, their reactors stabilizing for the dimensional transit. Aboard the Executor's bridge, Lord Vader stood before the viewport, watching his home galaxy grow larger as they approached the event horizon. Lord Vader, Commander Prodigy reported, all systems green. We are ready for transit. Proceed, Commander. The Executor entered the portal first, its massive hull shimmering as it crossed dimensional boundaries. For a moment, the ship existed in both universes simultaneously, a ghost in Federation space, a returning hero in Imperial territory. Then it was gone, pulled through to the other side by forces beyond Federation science. The Devastator followed. Then the Relentless. And on the other side of reality, the Galactic Empire welcomed its lost fleet home. Behind them, the portal began to collapse, the resonance field destabilizing now that Vader's concentration no longer sustained it. The null point contracted rapidly, reality healing itself like flesh closing over a wound. Within minutes, all that remained was empty space and sensor records of something that should have been impossible. Aboard the Enterprise, Picard watched the portal's final moments with mixed emotions. Captain, Troy said softly, Lord Vader is gone. I can no longer sense his presence. The connection between our universes has been severed. And 8,000 former Imperial soldiers are now our responsibility, Picard replied. Mr. Data, how are the evacuees adapting? Remarkably well, Captain. Captain Rex has been instrumental in helping them transition to Federation custody. Many have expressed interest in joining Starfleet or settling on colony worlds. They represent a significant diplomatic opportunity, individuals with first-hand knowledge of both military discipline and personal freedom. Riker moved to stand beside Picard. Captain, do you think we did the right thing? We saved 8,000 lives, but we also sent 12,000 back to an empire that will probably use them to conquer more worlds, suppress more freedoms. We might have just strengthened tyranny while weakening ourselves. Picard considered this carefully. We gave them a choice, number one. That's all we could do. Some chose freedom. Some chose loyalty. Both are valid decisions when made with full knowledge of the consequences. What matters is that they chose, rather than having the choice made for them. And if Lord Vader's empire invades this universe again, if they return with overwhelming force, then we'll face that threat when it comes. But for now, we've demonstrated that even the most conditioned, most loyal soldiers can overcome their programming when given truth and opportunity. That's not weakness, number one. That's the Federation's greatest strength. The belief that minds can change, that beings can grow, that no one is beyond redemption. Even Lord Vader. Picard looked at the empty space where the portal had been. Perhaps especially Lord Vader. He claimed General Skywalker was dead, that he killed that part of himself. But in his final message to the defectors, he invoked Skywalker's name. The man he was still exists somewhere beneath that armor, beneath that pain, beneath all that darkness. Whether that man ever emerges again, he shook his head. That's his choice to make. Admiral Nechayev's voice transmitted from the Valiant. All ships, this is Admiral Nechayev. The dimensional anomaly has been neutralized. The Imperial threat has been removed from Federation space. Well done, everyone. Captain Picard, your unorthodox methods worked. I'll expect a full report when we return to Starbase 234. Understood, Admiral. Enterprise out. As the Federation task force prepared to depart the Felton system, Captain Rex contacted the Enterprise from the refugee processing vessel where 8,000 former Imperial soldiers awaited their new lives. Captain Picard, this is Rex. On behalf of every clone who chose freedom, thank you. We know what you risked to give us that choice. Captain Rex, the Federation stands for the principle that all sentient beings have the right to determine their own fate. We simply upheld that principle. What you do with your freedom now, that's up to you. We won't waste it, sir. Some of us want to join Starfleet. Some want to settle down, start families, live quiet lives. Some just want to see this galaxy that values individuals over numbers. But all of us want to honor the brothers who stayed behind. The ones who chose loyalty over survival. They made their choice, Captain. Just as you made yours. Neither choice was wrong. They were simply different paths taken by different people with different values. That's what freedom means. Understood, Captain. Rex out. As the Enterprise jumped to warp, leaving the Felton system behind, Picard returned to his ready room. Somewhere in the Star Wars galaxy, aboard the Executor, Lord Vader stood before Emperor Palpatine's holographic projection, his armor still bearing scorch marks from the dimensional transit, his respirator laboring to maintain life support after the catastrophic energy expenditure required to open the portal. Lord Vader, the Emperor's voice carried amusement and calculation in equal measure. You have returned to us. And you bring tales of a galaxy where democracy flourishes, where individuals refuse to submit to order, where beings choose chaos over certainty. How fascinating. My Emperor, the Federation represents a significant ideological threat. Their philosophy, if allowed to spread, could undermine nothing, Lord Vader. They are weak. Hopelessly, irredeemably weak. They gave you the opportunity to destroy them, and you chose to leave. They value individual choice over collective purpose. They will tear themselves apart through internal disagreement long before they pose any threat to our empire. With respect, my Emperor, they converted 8,000 of my soldiers. 8,000 troops who chose their freedom over our order. That is not weakness. That is dangerous. Palpatine's holographic image leaned forward, yellow eyes gleaming. Then it is fortunate we have closed the dimensional bridge permanently. Let the Federation have their 8,000 clones. We have millions more. Let them believe in their principles. We have the power to impose ours. And you, Lord Vader, have learned a valuable lesson about the cost of sentimentality. What lesson, my master? That attempting to give tools the illusion of choice only invites betrayal. The clones who remained loyal, the 12,000 who returned with you, they serve not because you offered them alternatives, but because they never questioned their purpose in the first place. Blind obedience, Lord Vader, is infinitely more valuable than informed consent. Vader bowed his head. Yes, my master. But as the hologram faded and Vader stood alone in his chamber, he replayed Captain Picard's final question in his mind, "Are you glad we're alive?" And the answer, the honest answer he would never speak aloud, was yes. Yes, he was glad Rex lived. Glad Fives lived. Glad 8,000 brothers had chosen survival over sacrifice, even if that choice meant they'd never serve him again. Because somewhere, buried beneath decades of pain and rage and service to the dark side, a part of Anakin Skywalker still existed. Still believed that beings deserved better than to be tools in someone else's grand design. That part of him would remain buried. Suppressed. Denied. But it would never truly die. And perhaps, in another universe, 8,000 clones who'd learned to choose would tell stories about the Dark Lord who let them go. Who valued loyalty but understood freedom. Who served an empire while remembering what it meant to be human. Those stories would matter. Someday.